TitleMatchNetwork.com.
Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot interview series. Today we're joined by a true legend in the sport of professional wrestling, Kevin Nash. Thanks for being here today with us.
Thanks for having me.
Down here in Florida. My very first question to you would be how you got started in the wrestling business and if you were a fan of it growing up.
Yeah, I was a fan. I grew up in Detroit, south Detroit, so we had big time wrestling out of Detroit. And like most kids, you go through a period where you watch it, religiously, and then you kind of grow out of it. And then when I came back, I went over to Europe for a couple of years. I played some ball over there, came back, and it was kind of like the mid-Hogan era in WWF. And I went with some friends of mine down in Joe Louis and watched it. It was like, it was a lot different than the pro wrestling I had watched.
Right.
And from there, I just decided that I could do it. And it took me a while, but I, just kind of find the inroads to get into it. It's just, if you're a big guy and you go to wrestlers and say, hey, can you help me break in? The last thing they want to do is, put a 6'10" guy in the roster, have a chance for that guy to succeed at their expense. So ended up in Atlanta and ran into the Steiners at a gym. And Robbie and Scotty kind of pointed me in the right direction. And I ended up at like a WCW developmental camp,
right,
which was run by Jody Hamilton. And about 9 months later, I did the Clash of the Champions.
I was going to ask you, what was Jody Hamilton like as a trainer?
It was amazing because he was a giant. He was a big guy, heavy-wise. But he could still move. I think the thing that Jody brought was he really knew the psychology. Like, he taught you the psychology. Like most, I think that's the biggest thing is these kids learn how to do, backflips and all this other stuff, but they don't learn the psychology of the business. Where Jody taught you the psychology and did the less is more. And he said, you're a big guy. You're not going to need to do that much.
Right.
You just have to look convincing in the few things that you do. And that's kind of the way I never really did a whole lot in my career.
Well, I guess for training wise, what was the hardest thing for you to pick up besides psychology? Or would you say that was the hardest part of the business to learn? I
think I broke into the era when guys didn't sit in the back and go over the match, step by step. You went out there and it was the same old. It was the days of the heels in one locker room, babyface in another locker room, and the referee brought the finishes back and forth.
Right. So
it's completely different if you don't know what you're doing, and the guy's out there just calling a match to you, and it's. You can know what you're doing, but in front of a crowd and everything else the first couple of times, I was thinking this will be easy, and I went out there and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done.
As far as like during the training, was there any times where you got discouraged and you said, maybe this is not for me?
No, I set my goal to make it. I wasn't gonna, the first day I got there, they did the 500 Hindus and 500 step-ups, 500 push-ups, run the ropes, run around the building. They ran you till you puked, and then to see if you were stupid enough to come back. And this is when you had to pay.
Right.
It was like $3,000 or whatever it was to.
Did you have to pay?
Yeah,
okay.
I had to pay. So it's basically, I give you $3,000. You try to get me to quit, basically torture me, and then see if I come back the next day.
Huh.
That was, and 9 out of 10 guys didn't.
All right. So I guess your first gig with WCW was as the Master Blaster, right?
Right.
Okay. What are your memories of that whole deal?
It was, I had long black hair. I was working at a strip club, and Ole said I got an idea for it. He told me he wanted me to have a red mohawk, which I just thought like,
Right.
Yeah, it's just one of those deals like, and now I can't even have a normal life. Now I'm going to look like a pro wrestler. And, which I always took it as, okay, this is one of those situations. They're going to test you to see if you'll balk at doing something. And then they gave me a partner who was supposed to lead me as I, got seasoned, who was, greener than I was.
Right.
He lasted 6 days and quit. He was illiterate, couldn't read.
Who was that again?
His name was Corey Pendarvis.
Okay.
It was broken in by the legendary worker, Ox Baker.
Huh. He's a trip.
Yeah. And so, a week into my first run, I don't have a partner. And while I'm in Hammond, Indiana, and Al Green was in the locker room. Al was working first match as a heel. And Al had a kind of funky hairdo, so they threw Al and me together. And then Al and I worked together for probably maybe 6-7 months, and then they wanted him to do a job. It was around Christmas time. We were supposed to job the Steiners. He hemmed and hawed about it. They fired him.
Right.
Sent me home. Told me to grow my hair out, and they're going to repackage me. So at this point, it's been my first year, and I probably had maybe 40 matches.
Wow.
Total. And then the next year I just sat around, then they put that Oz gimmick on me.
That was my next question. Who came up with the Oz gimmick?
That was Dusty's brainstorm.
What were your initial, impressions of that whole idea?
That was fucking ridiculous. I've said it a million times to people. I know it's redundant, but he sat there and told me, "You're going to be Oz." And I just said, Oz is a geographical region. It's the Wizard of Oz. He's the wizard. The guy behind the curtain. I said, no, he's the wizard.
Right.
Oz is that's where they're at. And he just looked at me, and I just thought, like, okay, he's my boss. I always thought, to this day, I think it was a rib.
Right.
I just think it was, because I did it like 2 or 3 times, and that was it. I sat for another whole year.
I was going to ask you around this time period, was Flair booking at this time period at all, or was that later on?
I mean,
I know they had the committee.
I think they had the committee then.
Okay.
I don't think Rick had the pencil then.
At that point in time, what were your thoughts of Rick as a booker?
You know what? You're so green at that. You wouldn't know a good idea, if you heard one.
You're still in the process of learning the business.
Yeah, I was, and it was there was such a separation between that crew of guys, the Wyndhams and that clique of guys, and then the Johnny B. Bads and me, and the guys that, as we used to say in center stage, the guys in the right locker room.
Huh.
The guys that were making less than $150 a year.
All right.
So there was, you just were happy to have your job, and they made it that situation. They made it, where you were just happy to have a job.
Huh. How did you wind up with the Vinnie Vegas character?
They were 0 for 2 on gimmicks, so they were going to give me one shot. So I watched that Blue Heaven movie with Steve Martin.
Right.
And I thought it was a pretty cool character. So I kind of just copied that along with some other characters. I just kind of put that together myself. So it's good enough to entertain Shawn Michaels, which was key. Shawn Michaels watched it on TV and liked it, and that's why he wanted me to come in and be his bodyguard.
Right.
So,
now, before all that happened, I guess who was your mentor around this period of time? Did anybody take you under their wing?
Yeah,
Rick
Rude. Yeah,
wow.
Rude was my guy. Yeah.
What are some of the valuable lessons that he taught you?
Never take your gimmicks until you're 50 miles close to the next town. Rick's whole thing was he was the first guy that I really watched that could do he could have people, laugh, cry, be hostile and hate him. I mean, he really was able to change his gears and turn emotion in the ring. But he was the first guy I saw that was a pure entertainer. He'd work his ass off. He'd snag on your back, but when it came time for you to come back, nobody fed a comeback like Rude.
Right.
He really just got up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, and took those crazy ass bumps. But he also he had created a character, and you'd see him backstage. He'd be walking, smoking a cigarette. That music would kick. He'd throw the cigarette out and go out. And as soon as that light hit him, you could just see that character. He'd create a character that was very close to his own character that he was able to slide into really easy, no matter what was going on. And that's one thing he told me. He said, the closer your character is to you, then you're always going to be on. If it's a far reach for you, then it's going to be hard. And a lot of times, that's what happens when the promoter, determines that he's going to give you a gimmick. If it doesn't fit you, then it's pretty much an uphill battle for you.
Right, that's true. At the time, you were also repaired with DDP, Diamond Dallas Page.
Right.
What were your thoughts on being teamed up with him?
Dallas is really positive. There were times then when I was going to quit, because I was making $100,000 bouncing.
Right.
So it's like it wasn't that I wasn't making money, and I had a couple little things on the side I was doing, some collections and stuff. So it was like I could, and at this point, Watts has taken over, and Watts has got everybody on like $300 and $400 nightlies. So nobody's getting paid because he was one of those ex-pro wrestlers that would go into the office and tell the mark bosses that these guys will do this for free. You can pay him a lot less than this to make himself look better.
Right. Did you get along with Bill Watts at all?
No, not at all. Not at all. I thought he was an asshole. I thought he was a bully.
I was going to ask you that. A lot of people say,
He never messed with me like man on man. I mean, he gave me a hard time. But actually, as time went on and he got to know me a little bit, like he was the first one that thought like you could be a big rugged babyface. Maybe that's what you're supposed to be. And he had some insight. I'm not saying he wasn't a stupid guy. I just think that he had some psychological problems.
Teaming up with DDP, was he ribbed a lot early on back then? Because a lot.
Yeah, he was ribbed a lot. There was one time it was in. God, I can't even think of what town it is. I want to think it was somewhere in Kansas City.
Is this the Battle Royal?
Yeah, when they stripped
Steiners?
him. Yeah.
He told us that. We just did an interview with him last
Did
week.
you?
He was talking about it.
It was funny, because Dallas had like 9,000 layers of shit on. And Hump was his manager. And they had him and he was down. And Robbie just, this is before Robbie was all torn up. Robbie was so innately strong that he just like grabbed him and just pulled it, and like his clothing exploded off of him like a rubber band. And the funny thing was Brad Armstrong was in the Battle Royal, and we got in the back, and he said, "I don't know what was worse, seeing Dallas naked or Humperdinck take his shirt off and give it to Dallas," because Hump took his shirt off, which was a sight.
That's great.
But, that was a good rip.
We were speaking of Mark, people involved in the company at the time. What were your thoughts on Jim Herd?
I thought he was a punch drunk ex. I mean, it's just like one of those deals where you look at a guy and you're like, okay, how's this guy in charge?
Right.
Like, what is, and I forget what his background. His
Pizza Hut something like that.
Something like that. Typical of that Turner administration.
Did you see a lot of that? Guys come in for the spot, like Kip Fry and all that. And
yeah, I mean Kip Fry, he it's just one after another. It was just like, and that was the whole thing. They brought Bischoff in, and Bischoff, was there and hired before I left to go to New York. And he pulled me aside. He said, "Don't go. I'm going to turn this thing around." And I was just thinking, dude, you're like a Ken doll. You look like a weatherman.
Right.
Like I didn't know him.
Right.
And he really took offense to that. I found out later that, he asked me personally to stay because he, I think, saw something in me. But it's like anything else, at that point I had to get out of there. Now,
is it true that you knew you were going to WWF a year before you had gone?
No, about 5 or 6 months. I was under contract, and they, and I just took a trip with Barry Windham. Barry and I were pretty good friends, and he was like definitely in the political clique of WCW. And I just said, I just looked out the window and didn't say anything. We were going up to Dalton, Georgia from Atlanta, which is only about a 90-minute drive. Not even that, maybe an hour. I didn't say anything for the first 45 minutes. And he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "My wife said if I don't get out of wrestling, she's going to leave me." So, of course, I knew that was going to trickle right back. So when I went in and asked for my release,
right,
they already knew, his wife's going to leave him. And Ole just signed right off on it. And I took that release, walked to the back of the WCW office, and faxed it to J.J. Dillon.
That's great. That's awesome.
I said, "Can I use your fax machine? I need to get this to my lawyer."
Right.
Faxed it right to JJ. The next day I was on a plane up to see Vince. And that night, I helped Shawn win the IC championship in Albany.
That's quick.
So within 24 hours, I had done something that meant more than the 3 years that I had done it. at Turner. So I got there, and this is back when a big house for WCW was maybe the Omni, maybe Jacksonville, $35,000 houses.
Right.
My first night was in Albany, and I looked out in the curtain, and it was like Starcade for me.
Right.
I mean, it was a $72,000, $73,000 house in Albany, and this is $94, not $2,007. So it's probably like $110,000, $120,000 house now. I mean, there was probably 3,000, 4,000 people out there, and I was just like, holy shit.
Different ball game.
Yeah, it was. It was like, wow. And you felt good because back then, I mean, it was this show. That was the show. That was like going to the major leagues.
How did your relationship with Shawn develop? You said he liked your gimmick and stuff. Did he contact you, or?
He contacted, first, the Steiners had just came up there. And I got a call from Robbie. He said they were at a TV tape, I think, in Green Bay. And Robbie said, hey, he says, Shawn Michaels? I said, yeah. He said, would you want to be, he's looking for a bodyguard. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, if I can get out of my contract. He said he'd like, so that's how it started. Robbie, once again came to my rescue. And so then I just had to figure a way to get out of my contract.
Right.
So that took a little while.
Okay, before we get to WWF stuff, I want to talk a little bit more about WCW. What are your memories of Harley Race?
Great guy. He managed me, and they weren't doing anything with me, but at least I got to ride up and down the road with him.
This is my next question. Yeah, any good road stories and stuff like that?
You always hear the Harley stories. I remember one time we wrestled at the I think Big Cat was my tag team partner at the time. And we had wrestled in that old armory in Washington, D.C., like in the hood.
I know where it is. Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. And over by State Capitol, or the Capitol building. And so we leave and get turned around, and we're like in the hood, and Harley's driving the wrong way, 90 miles an hour. And some cop, just like it's a one-way street, and Harley just zips by this guy going 90.
Right.
Because Harley said, I'm not staying in the hood, but I'm not staying in the hood. So, cop, turns around. I said, Harley, the cop says, Harley pulls over. Now, anybody else would but Harley's unrolls his window, and Harley goes completely on the offensive on this guy. On and on and on. And the cop's just like, and finally the cop says, well, sir, he goes, I'm Harley Race. I need to get to the next town. How do I get there? And the cop says, gives him directions, and Harley says, thank you. Now, anybody else would go and turn their car directly around. Harley goes up 2 more streets and takes his left.
That's great.
Like the cop, I know the cop, I just I should give the guy a ticket, but he's got such brass balls, he really doesn't, I don't think it would affect him.
Did you know who Harley was or no?
I don't know if he did or not, but I think the guy knew Harley was somebody because nobody's that indignant that's not somebody.
Right.
He probably thought he was Harley Race. Is that some senator?
Yeah, exactly.
A white Cadillac.
That's great. What about Scott Levy? Memories of teaming up with Scotty?
We did he was Scotty the Body back then. Him, Dallas, and I, we were all buddies, Right. Scotty and Dallas and I were all buddies. We used to make little road trips together, and those 2 idiots would put a television on the dashboard and have these cords, and they had a VHS, and they would watch like Roseanne, or they would just, and they would
totally picture that too.
We go on these road trips, and Dallas is driving, or I'm driving, and they've got, and it's not like, the old DVD. I'm talking about
a real TV.
13-inch television jammed in the window of your car. But Dallas, when you travel with Dallas, it looked like Billy Zane getting on the Titanic.
Right.
On a 3-day trip, he'd have 57 bags. Dallas, what's in there? That's my, concoction of fruit and vegetables for this juice. And, the rest of the guys, it's just like got one little bag, a duffel bag. Dallas.
Now, when Ric Flair left for WWF and took the belt with him, did you take it personal since it was clearly a shot at trying to put the company out of business by him, or did it not bother you because you were just there, just earning your paycheck?
I remember thinking, because they kind of fucked Flair. They kind of gave me
Right.
So to me, it's just like, and I always liked Rick. Rick was always a gentleman. Rick always would pick up drinks for guys that didn't have cash. Like Rick was, he was one of those guys that didn't put his nose down to the greenhorns. And I thought it was, by that time we were all the rebels anyway. We were all anti-company. So anything that they, it was almost like he was like William Wallace.
Right. It was like for the boys.
Yeah. Way to go, Rick.
Now, we talked earlier about how you wound up in WWF. What were your initial impressions of Vince? What are your initial memories of meeting Vince for the first time?
First time, they dropped me off right in front of his house in Connecticut. I knocked on the door, and then he came and he had an Ico Pro sweatshirt on,
right.
A pair of black sweatpants. He was a lot bigger than I thought he would be. He's a taller guy than I thought he would be. But to me, it was like, if you're a baseball player and you're in the minor leagues, it'd probably like be the equivalent of opening the door in Steinbrenner, being there. I mean, he's, Vince is pretty iconic in our business. But he was very nice, very personable, and brought me in. And JJ was there, Pat was there, and Bruce Pritchard was there.
Right.
And they just kind of ran, and to me, it's just like they kind of had an idea of what they wanted to do with me, 6, 8, 10, 12 months ahead of time, which they used to do back then. And this is, here it is, basically you're talking to somebody that's kind of a, almost like a god in the wrestling business. Like, if he says this happens, it happens. And, he sat there and said, basically, this is the path that we want you to take.
I was going to ask you what was promised and as far as direction and titles.
Just that I would matter, And it was key, a lot of things that were key in my career. One of the keys were that they were under that drug scrutiny.
Right.
And I was clean at the time. I was, I'm clean now. I mean, I'm right at 305 pounds without taking anything. So I was the biggest clean guy, So it was like it was
perfect.
Yeah, it was
Right.
just like, here's a guy that's, because he always is going to want a bigger than life guy, and here was one that was basically just dropped off his doorstep.
Literally.
Yeah.
At this point, I guess, did you say to yourself, you finally made it?
I didn't think I really made it in my mind until I won the IC belt. Because back then people just didn't win belts. You didn't win a belt.
Right.
Guys just kind of winning a belt was kind of that was kind of when you made it. So I worked a lot. God, this is back when you were on the road. I think I worked 27 of the first 31 days I was there.
No, when you were Shawn, did Shawn guide you and basically tell you, do this at the ring, don't do that?
Yeah. I mean, and he was working with Scott at the time. He finished up with Marty, and then he went to Scott. Scott was working with Kid then when I got there. And
did you know Scott prior to this or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Scott and I actually drove up and down the road a little bit in the early days of WCW, and he was Diamond Stud. Because Dallas was, Dallas
right,
brought him in, and
who was it?
Yeah. So it's called goes. What were we?
Okay, I was asking you about Scott. It was the first time.
Yeah. Oh, so he came in as a Diamond Stud, and Dallas brought him in. So then Dallas introduced me to him, and
you guys hit it off right away, or?
Yeah, because we were both pot smokers. So we smoked one. I picked him up. The next TV we had was Macon, and I had a little bit. He had a little bit. And we took a little drive up to Macon together, and we got high. Drank a couple beers on the way to TV, and
nice.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Getting back to Shawn and you, as far as your relationship, and you guys, developed a relationship in the ring and out of the ring. Like, what were some of the things that he told you that you might have been doing wrong, or some of the things he might have liked?
The one thing they did was, you watch it nowadays, like, if somebody's outside, like a manager or something like that, they'll choke somebody in the rope 3 or 4 times during the course of a match. And it really doesn't, it doesn't mean anything. So the one thing was that we always did spots where Shawn would throw a guy out and I'd come around, stalk. The referee would come out and cut me off,
Right.
So we always, and that was one thing Shawn taught me early was, when you're a heel, if you do it in front of the referee, even though there's really no rules, there's the perception of rules.
Right.
So, and Scott was very instrumental also. Because they were working together, and when I did something, it changed the event. Changed the course of the events of the match. When I did something, it was usually led to a finish. So, once again, I didn't have any wasted motion in what I did, and it made my impact stronger. Shawn was over, and I was over through association.
Right.
And then their matches were great. And all I had to do was catch them or something like that. And so it was a really good spot. Plus, I got to watch 2 really good workers at ringside for almost 9 months. It was just, and it was sitting at nighttime and drink our beers and travel up and down the road and them explain, why they did what they did and why they thought they lost the people, why they thought they got them back. Just kind of learn how to just really put everything together.
Now, did they give you a time period before you'd actually go out there and start working your own singles matches at all? Or?
No, they said that I would work periodically with Shawn, probably in the bigger Northeast markets.
Right.
But house shows. Like the first time I worked an elimination match in the Garden and won it.
What was that like?
Unbelievable, And Luger was standing next to Vince and Shane, and when I saw Luger later on that night, and he said, "They're going to go with you, man." He said, "They just kept saying, God, look how big he is. Look how big he is. He's clean. Look how big he is." Because we'd already been tested back then. I mean, you were tested once a month, sometimes twice in a day.
Wow.
We do Philadelphia and get tested, and everybody, would think, "Oh, we can smoke now."
Right.
You go in the Hershey, and there'd be the piss crew again.
Huh. Anybody ever get busted for that?
Couple guys here and there, but I mean, it was Vince sat us down when the policy came down, and Vince just said, guys, this is a shoot. This is the way it's going to be, and this is what happens. 1,500, 3,000, 5,000, you're gone.
Wow.
And that was it.
Did you see anybody actually get fired from that whole entire deal? Or?
No, because nobody was that stupid.
Right, exactly. It's a lot of money thrown away.
Yeah, nobody was that stupid.
What do you remember about the night that the Bruise Brothers went after Shawn?
I wasn't there.
You weren't there for that? Okay.
I was in where was I now? Schaffenburg, Germany, I think, that night. I remember getting a call.
What exactly did you hear about that?
That Shawn was being Shawn, and they just had enough of it.
Right.
I mean, if you hear Shawn's recollection of it that night and Shawn's recollection of it now,
right?
Shawn's a different guy now.
I guess. What are your memories of your series of matches with Scott Hall?
I knew that he did he'd worked with Shawn for so long, and it was just like they were on autopilot. And Shawn's really athletic. He's smaller. You can toss him around, and then for them to say, okay, now you're going to work with this big cement mixer. I know Scott was like, oh God,
right?
I don't want to work with this guy. I don't want to smarten him up. But that's the whole thing is, you have to smarten the guy you're working with, or, you're going to have shit matches. And we ended up having a really good chemistry. It was a lot different. It was more of a street fight than it was an athletic contest. But, I mean, it worked for both of us. We had a good run together. Had good, once again, to me, Scott's the best worker probably that I've ever worked with, because Scott was 6'5", 6'6". Scott could work with Shawn. Scott could work with kids. Scott could work with me, Sid.
Right.
He was such a great worker. He just had so many demons.
Who are some of the other guys that you worked with? We'll talk about Scott coming up, definitely. Who are some of the other guys that you worked singles matches with before your big babyface turn?
When I was a heel, I worked with Bret.
Right.
At King of the Ring.
Did you like working with Bret?
Yeah, he was great.
A lot of people say he was hard to work with and he didn't really give back much. Or...
I don't know. God, I mean, I think if you respected him and didn't treat him as a little guy, I let him backbreaker me, and I think he always had this perception that he was the hitman. He was Bret Hart. I mean, he really was a character-driven guy, and if you played to that character, if you deemed that character worthy and strong, and he made sure that because he was going to beat you 9 times out of 10. So I mean, the stronger he made his opponent, the better it looked for Bret. But God, I loved working with Bret.
Some say Bret is overrated, and others completely disagree. What do you think?
I don't think he's overrated.
Okay.
I think of my top 3 matches I ever had in my life, he's one of them.
Right.
But there's the one that I lost the belt to him in at the USA Arena. I think it was what was that? Some Survivor Series. I don't know what that was.
I don't even remember.
Yeah, but I got to turn heel. I got to turn heel out of that one, back heel.
Did you like the actual babyface turn, or do you think you had more money left as a heel with Shawn?
I wouldn't have minded it because I got over kind of being like a dark and dirty, And then as soon as I turned babyface, Vince had me singing with a Santa hat on to the employees, and that's how we opened the next Raw. And it was just like But I've always said that Vince will take the edge off if he can, because Vince still believes in his heart that people want to see a guy carrying the American flag.
Right.
That red, white, and blue, that patriotism, that all-American. He still thinks, no matter how many times the anti-hero will surface
right.
and prove him wrong, I think in his heart. And I don't know if he actually thinks that or just wants it to happen. He still wants that to happen. He still wants it to be there. And I don't think it's going to happen.
Either do I. What are your memories of working with Sid? We just did one with Sid as well last week, and he took highly of you.
I loved working with Sid. I mean, we never had great matches per se, like work rate wise, but I think people like to see 2 giants work. Sid was limited, and I was limited, but Sid did enough things that looked real good, and I did enough things that looked real good. He cut a good he was a great promo, Sid, Scott and I got Sid paid a couple of different times. We brought him in WWF when nobody would touch him.
He told me you got him in WCW again.
And I got him back in WCW for a big contract.
Right.
Because people can say what you want to. Sid's money.
Definitely.
He's money. Sid's money.
I think he's going to go back. Maybe they're talking to him now. So
he'll draw again.
Definitely.
Sid's money.
Did you have any problems working with him because you guys have the same size and all? No, not at all.
No, because we were friends. So it was always it was never
right.
There was no antagonist there. It was just how can we make this the best with both our limitations?
Wow. What do you think were your limitations at the time?
I mean, I came into the business with a bad leg.
Right.
I'd had 9 knee operations before my first match, so I mean, I was pretty gimped up. So, but I mean, it's like anything else, Just you're 6'10", 6'11", just not going to be able to do the things the little guys do. Nor would I want to see, I don't want to see a big guy. I don't want to see Kliq drop kick.
Right. It's true. Memories of the quick match you had with Bob Backlund.
I'd gotten really drunk on a European trip. I was the IC champion, and I got hammered on the way to the town.
Right.
So we got to the town. I had my match. I was working with Sammy from the Shrinkers, and we went 10 minutes. Sammy was about as bad a shape as I was, but he was so good. He carried us. We had a decent match, and I got out of the ring, and Tony Gurria said, "You need to call the office." So I called. I talked to Vince, and Vince said, "You need to come out to my house when you get back. We need to have a talk." I was like, "Oh man, I fucked up. I was getting the push, and now I got hammered over here, and I'm in trouble." And this is back when we did 23, 24, 25-day European trips on 2 buses.
That's crazy.
I mean, just insanity. Just getting hammered every night. I mean, you'd have 5-6 hour bus rides.
There's nothing else to do.
No, there was nothing else to do. And at least that's the excuse we're using.
Did you call me up Did the company have a policy at all about that at all? Or?
No, they never had a no alcohol policy. I'm sure they probably had one not be on the way to the matches.
Right.
I didn't see it.
Right.
I don't think any of us did. I think at that point they were going to the whip so often and so hard that they just knew the guys were going to crack. Just as long as you continue to perform, I think it was okay.
Right.
So I came home and they picked me up. All the guys all get to the airport. It was so haggard. And you had like a whole 4 days off, including that day you landed as one of them, and the other end was the day when you had to travel back.
Right.
So it was basically, and I'm losing one of those days to stay in New York City. And so I go to the house, and it was kind of a nice day, kind of sunny. We're out by Vince's pool, and he came out there, and he said, I said, I'm thinking about it. He says, I'm going to put the strap on me. I'm thinking, I already got the strap. I see champ. He goes, yeah, I'm going to have you beat Backlund at Madison Square Garden. So I'm thinking, Backlund, I'm like, oh, what? He's talking about the strap.
Right.
So I did now, it's just like, and I'm not kidding, it was like he was speaking to me, but I wasn't listening. I was already like, thinking like, oh my God. My mom's dying at this point of breast cancer. And, I was praying that someday, that she'd last, she'd live long enough, because she always said, you'll be world champion. You'll see. And, so it was like, I couldn't wait to call her, because it was like, okay, this is going to happen. And it happened in November. I got the strap. And then she passed December the 27th. So it was like a month later, my mom passed away. But I remember, like, it was one of those deals where kind of didn't tell anybody, didn't tell Shawn, didn't tell anybody for a long time. Because it was a couple months coming still. But, yeah, it was... And Bob did a great job. Bob didn't,
He was cool about it?
Yeah, Bob was pro. Bob crawled back all the way from the ring, all the way back through the curtain, selling his back. He crawled.
Good.
So it was...
Was Bob, I guess, hard to work with in his rematches, or was he easy to work with? Brutal.
But it wasn't Bob's fault. It wasn't my fault. It was, then I got Jerry Briscoe handing me a modern day script of, you're going to do these. I was like, they wanted me to chain wrestle. And, I just said, fuck, you got to be kidding me. Like, it was almost like, it was crazy because, when you get this, when you get there, you think that, they know everything. And the more that you learn, the more you realize, like, they don't know everything. And some of the guys don't know anything that are in the hierarchy. And it's like, yeah, that might have worked for you, Jerry, but 7-foot chain wrestler, it ain't going to happen. And we did a couple of matches. We're in Sacramento, and Bob, was calling a match. He sent me off and yelled sunset flip. And I sunset flipped him in the middle of the ring. If you can imagine the visual of a 7-foot guy sunset flipping Backlund. I came back, Taker said, if I ever fucking see you do that again, I'm in the ring. He says, God, he goes, what are they doing? I said, Shortly after that, Scott Hall got a call, and they said, Scott, you're going to work with Backlund, and Kevin's going to work with Double J.
Wow.
So I worked with Double J and Road Dogg, and they fed me, and it was, it was perfect.
What are your memories of some of your matches with those guys?
With Jeff?
Jeff.
To this day, I could go out, I could work a 6-month program with Jeff Jarrett, as beat up as I am right now.
That easy?
Yeah. I think he's one of the funnest recollections of my career is Jeff and I worked like 5 or 6 days in a row in Montana during the end of the WCW. Traveled in the same Suburban, drank beer, to, from, after. It was in the middle of summer Montana, and we worked 25, 30 minutes every night.
Wow.
And you knew you were never going to get potatoed, never going to get hurt, just...
Good time.
Yeah, that's how, it was like, it's supposed to be.
Right. Talk about what happened with you and Pierre up in Canada, the incident.
Yeah, he just marked out. He got up there, and, back then it was like, it was almost like the Canadian mafia, like the Rougeaus and all those guys. Nobody do a job up in Montreal.
Do you know and all those?
Yeah, nobody. It was just like, and Pat was kind of, Pat was, silently, you don't need to jump up there. So it became a situation where I got up there and it's just like, I'm supposed to go over and we'll do a count out. And I said, man, count out's lame. So then back then, we all, it wasn't no guaranteed money. So everybody was pretty protective of each other. Taker got in his face, Scott got in his face, Shawn got in his face. He said, I'm not going to do it. So they do this lame count out. So I called Vince that night and I said, you either make this right tomorrow or I'm just, shit's on.
Right.
And we were in, I think, Ottawa. And he jumped off the top rope to drop a leg and his ass landed on my head. And that was just it. I mean, I was pissed as it was. I got up, I kicked him, punched him a couple of times. I told him, this is the finish. And I gave him the finish. I kicked him as hard as I could when I sent him off. I drew him down as hard as I could. Came in the back and he was acting like he wanted to fight me. I just sat there and I just told him, dude, I said, if I stand up, I said, I'm not going to stop. No matter how much you tell me to stop, I'm not going to stop until I just completely just kill you.
Right.
I said, if you want to fight, I'll fight. I don't have a problem with it. I said, but I'm not going to hit you 3 times and then you say, I've had enough. I said, I'm going to beat you to death. And, he acted like, Sarge was holding him back. I asked Sarge later, I said, were you holding him back? He said, I wasn't holding him back. He said, he didn't want nothing to do with it.
Any heat from the office after all that, or was it?
No, they fucking love that shit.
Right.
They try to stir all that poison up. I said,
Did you have a lot of pressure on yourself when you were the champion? Did you feel the pressure?
You do what you can do.
Right.
I mean, you're smart enough in business by then to go, okay, it's not my ideas. I'm doing the best I can do. I'm working my ass off every night.
What are your memories of the very first WrestleMania that you worked?
That was with that great ladder match.
Right.
I was only out there for a couple of minutes. It was great. It's like running back a punt in the Super Bowl, I guess. It wasn't like having a match, but you were still in the game.
Could you sense that there was a change of direction in the company in that now more athletic guys were getting pushed as compared to the big monster heels and muscle baby faces?
I think that Shawn was an exception. I think it's like, do you build your team around a big man or Jordan comes along once very, very rarely. Shawn was an exception to that. Shawn was tenacious enough and athletic enough, and he was believable. And on top of that, Shawn's not a small guy. Shawn's 6'1".
Right.
People always say, "Oh, well, big guy said Shawn's 6'1". Oh, he's not 6'1". I'm like, Shawn's 6'1". You put him in his wrestling boots, he's 6'2". Shawn's not a little guy. Shawn was probably 235 back then. So you look at Shawn in that era. Take a 6'2", 235-pound guy. Now he's a big guy in this business. Business has got a lot smaller, And so, it wasn't like Shawn was that small. It's just that everybody was so big.
How did Vince change during his trial? As far as personality-wise, did he become a little bit more humble?
No, he never sold it.
Okay.
He never changed. He got his neck fused. Remember, he showed up at White Plains TV, and we just sat there, me, Shawn, and Scott. We just glared at him to see he came in the back door, got some coffee, and turned around and, pulled on and screwed around one of the agents. We just watched him that whole day, and he never sold it. I was just like, that's what I said. I said, yeah, we ain't no trouble because if he ain't selling it, we ain't in trouble.
I was going to ask you, were you or any of the boys ever worried that he would go to jail?
Yeah, we were afraid we were all going to be out of jobs. There was a lot of, for a while there, all the papers, especially because we spent so much time in the Northeast, we basically lived in New York.
Right.
Or New Jersey. And, you read the papers there, and it was like, the feds, it was a slam dunk. He was going to do time.
How did he change after the trial? Did he become more cocky or?
No, not really. He that night we won. We were in some place in Pittsburgh. I think there were not Pittsburgh, but someplace in Pennsylvania. He came out, he had a couple of scotches with us. It was like the first time he had any cocktails with the boys, and that was that. It was business as usual.
I guess back then, Mountain Rock, he did a thing with his home video camera. We had the guys taking drugs and all that shit. What are your thoughts on that whole entire deal? He was going to market it, I think, or
I
something.
never
like that.
saw it.
Okay.
Did you ever see it?
I seen clips of it. He put on the internet, and for whatever reason, it was never, put out. Obviously, I guess he got, threatened by a lawsuit or something like that. So
Yeah. I mean, what's the question? What I think about him doing that behind everybody's back, or what I think about how bad the drug use was?
I'll ask you about the drug use later on. I mean, I guess the guys didn't even know that he was filming, or
No. But you know what? I don't think it would have mattered.
Right, exactly.
If he would have said, "Hey, I'm filming this," I think he'd probably got more. That's where he probably, it was pretty wide. It was.
What was the drug use like back then at that time period? Because I know the road schedule was crazy and all that.
Couldn't smoke dope. Okay, so you take that out of the equation. It's just like, so the other thing you can do is you can take pills, and you can drink booze.
Right.
If you're one of the top guys, I mean, most guys drink beer. Most guys don't drink liquor. So you can't be, bloated toad and drink, by this time, it takes 20 beers to get a buzz. So, it's like, well, I got to work every night, so I can't be a bloated toad with a big fat beer gut. So it's like, you take pills,
right,
and just kick them in with 4 or 5 beers, and I'd never taken a pharmaceutical drug in my life before I got into bodybuilding. I mean, until I got in the wrestling industry.
What was your, drug of choice, if you want to talk about it?
But I had to do, I was in that Soma era,
Everybody, yeah.
Somas were very popular, muscle relaxers. They just, they whack you.
Huh.
Sometimes one night you take 3 as your opening volley and it would do nothing. Other nights you take 3 and it'd be like, it was just weird. And we had all these different theories where carbohydrates kicked them in, and pizza right after it, and bang, we had all these theories of what made Somas work. And, we'd get the Mexican bootleg ones, and those were horrible. And so we'd get some script ones and 2 of those, and you take 12 of this. It's amazing that, your heart's a muscle. You're eating, 25 muscle relaxers a night.
Right.
Drinking 20 beers. You say you're not going to drink, but once you get all whacked, you drink. But then Xanax were another one. The 2 milligram Xanax were a popular amongst my running mates and myself. Those. When I first broke in, we had Placibills. The greenies, the 750s. We had Placibills. And one time, Kid brought phenobarbital on a European trip, like a big vat of them. It was just like a bunch of monkeys in a room. Like, what do phenobarbital do? They're barbiturate. I got caffeine in them. That can't be that bad. We can take 3? I'll take 3 before we wrestle.
Oh,
So it was. But it was such a. It was like you were like a family. It was like almost like a fraternity, like a frat. Even guys you didn't like you go out to a bar and the guys that you didn't particularly, and I'm not saying you didn't like them because there wasn't anybody that, all the time I've been in this business, there's never been a guy that I can say, boy, I really just don't like him or I hate him. Or,
right.
There's been a lot of guys I'm sure that have said that about me, but I never had that, like any malice towards anybody or anything like that. It's just like, you were kind of like, it was like family. Like, you might not have been my favorite brother, but you were my, and so many times we'd be out and it'd be like, hey man, what's that asshole doing over there? I don't know, but those hockey guys from the other town are messing with him. It'd be like 9,
right.
He might not have been our buddy, but you didn't mess with anybody in that locker room.
Speaking of families, in your mind, when do you think the Kliq was truly formed?
When we were doing those, the Raw was out of the Manhattan Center, and we were doing those face-to-faces, which
right.
were really a time-consuming, and it was like face-to-face, the Manhattan Center, which was a brutal place to shoot those TVs, like one shower, locker rooms about as big as a twin-size bed. Went from there to the Titan production place and sat in this room that was maybe the size of a hotel room. 25, 30 guys, crash laying on this indoor-outdoor carpeting, eating this processed chicken breast and baked ziti, doing these face-to-faces all day long, and then, you know, running like Bushkill, Poughkeepsie, doing these, like, you know, just that
shit
whole,
towns.
yeah, just, you know, I mean, and living in that Jetport over in Elizabeth, New Jersey, hanging out at the strip joint there, Lookers.
Oh, I know, yeah.
You know, just that it was just such a, and you just had to have, you had to have some running mates. You know, you just had to have some guys. And I was already tight with Shawn when I got there, you know, and I'd already known Scott. And when first night after Albany, we got to the Jetport, and Shawn reached back and he bit something. He reached it back, and it was half a Placidil. He bit into it, and he gave me the other half. And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Just take it." And we went down, and Scott had some Valiums. He gave me one of those. I never take any pills. Drank a couple of beers. I'm like, these aren't kicking in. They're not doing anything. And they just looked at me, and it was basically like, all right, I got it. So then it was a couple more days, and after that, it was just that grind. It's just like, you know, you mentally were so, you were so stretched mentally because you had to be on so often, and just that, you know, that you had to be able to shut you, and you couldn't. You'd get home at night and be, you know, you got 3-4 guys in a Super 8, you know, sleeping, you know, I mean, nobody's making any money.
Right.
TVs were $50 you got paid. Which, you know, good luck spending $50 in the Northeast getting a car and a hotel and food. And you know, you're getting lunch meat when you go to the TV taping at WWF. So it was really different times. And, you know, God, you had to be able to shut that off. And sometimes, man, the only way you could do it was get a buzz. And, you know, it's just like, Scott and I had a conversation months ago. We were talking about, was there anybody that at that time on our roster that wasn't just getting whacked every night? And we laughed and said, not that we were hanging out with. You know, it was just like, you know, you go there and, you know, it'd be like you'd walk in and here'd come Yoko with like a tray of like 50 shots of Jack. And then, you know, and you'd have to, and the thing was, guys would toss them over the shoulders. The night went on, so you had to do them, like hold it and the guy would go, and then you'd have to gargle it and then swallow it so nobody could throw the shots.
Right.
So, you know, you do that and be like, oh, God, then here come Taker with another tray. You know, and it just like, but it just, and it was that kind of every single night. You know, it's amazing. You know, a lot of guys died. It's amazing it wasn't 10 times.
Yeah, it's great.
And, you know, the thing is, it's just like people always blame Vince. You know, it's just like, I never once got a memo saying I had to take pills.
Right.
You know, I had to stay up all night and party and drink. I never got the memo. I don't think anybody else did. It's just that, you know.
Part of the business?
Yeah, it was at that time. I just think that, you know, especially that Minnesota crew. Oh, the business is done in the bar.
Right.
You know, that whole Minnesota crew always, that was, you know, Rude always said that. You know, business,
Rude.
Yeah. You know, business is done in the bar. That's where all the business gets done.
Going into your match, we'll talk about the Kliq probably coming up again. Going into your match at WrestleMania with Shawn, how far did you and Shawn want to push the limits?
We wanted to have a good match. You know, I mean, I think at that point Shawn was he was really trying to get that. You know, Shawn wanted the belt, so Shawn was gonna, you know, he was gonna try to outperform me.
Right.
You know, and I mean, I knew it, but it was like, you know, it's funny when you're that close of friends, being competitive against each other is not that bad. You know, because it's just like, you know, he would always tell me and Scott, you know, Scott, I'm twice as good as you, and Kev, I'm 3 times as good as you. You know, while we're in the car. I mean,
right.
It was a daily thing with Shawn. He tells how much better he was than us.
Huh.
And Scott and I, you know, Scott, whatever. Yeah, he didn't really, you know. But no, it was, and I knew he was going to go. And I knew he was going to try to do a pace that would blow me up.
Right.
You know, because it was fast. It was a fast-paced match. And I was blown up, but I knew that if I leaned on him, Like I got him in a rear chin and I leaned on him and just put my weight on him. And I could feel him starting to labor just because I'd bend him over enough where he couldn't catch his breath out of the spot. And then he got blown up a little bit, so then that slowed him down. But it was I thought it was a good match. You know, I mean, for that era, it was a good. I thought the one that we had in Omaha was really good.
What pay-per-view was that?
It was no holds barred match we had in Omaha. It was in your house. So we pulled off of Shawn's leg.
Right.
We used the fire extinguisher. You know, I look at that match and I see what ECW did, and I went, "Gee, I wonder who come up with all those things."
Do you think that Bret Hart felt threatened at the time watching you guys?
Nah, because I mean, Bret. Even when they put the strap on me, my first match was the Royal Rumble after I became champion, and I wrestled Bret, and you know, it was a tie. You know, we went to a draw there. So it wasn't like, you know, I mean, that's the whole thing to me. It's just like, could you imagine giving a guy the strap now and then his first title defense is a draw?
All right, that would be really bad for business.
Right. And that's what they did to me.
Right.
You know, and so it's just like, gee, thanks for the nod that you're our guy, we're going with you. We're going to put you're the champion for the new generation, but we're really not going with you.
Right.
Know, we're not sold on you. And gee, the office isn't sold on you. Should the fans be? You know, I look at it and I say, man, my entire life has always been that kind of a situation where it's never just a, you know, I'd win the lotto and get hit by a truck the next morning.
Right.
Know? So I just look at it as I've been very fortunate.
Oh, getting back to Bret. So did you feel that he was threatened by watching you guys or not really? Okay.
No, I mean, Bret's thing was he had so much tenure with the company.
Right.
You know, I mean, he'd been there for so long.
Memories and thoughts on Lex Luger in WWF. You talked earlier about him and you got along with him, but
I thought Lex was great. Loved traveling with him.
Right.
Good-hearted guy.
As far as today, are you surprised what's happened to him in his private life? Or
yeah, you know what? It's one of those situations to me, like if somebody would told me in '93 that Lex Luger would be in the situation that he's in right now, I'd be like, there's no way. Because to me, you know, Lex was the Roman Empire. You know, he was, you know,
he had the look and everything.
He had everything. He was articulate. He had business ventures outside the business.
What do you think happened?
I just think that the business is it's just a black hole, man. If you just get, I mean, it's just like anything else. It eats some people alive, and I think that the WCW party was pretty strong. I mean, it rivaled anything that I've ever. When that Nitro thing took off, I mean, it was like I couldn't wait to go to TV on Monday for the party.
Right.
It was like we're gonna party like rock stars, and it's gonna start in the minute we get there because Hogan and Randy are gonna have beer in the locker room.
Right.
And it's gonna be woo, you know, and all we got to do is go out and stand. And Hogan's gonna cut a promo for the last 8 minutes of the show, so all we got to do is stand.
Right.
You know, hold on to the rope, whatever you have to do. We can do whatever we want, and then bail out of there and go, and then just go. And we're in major metropolitan areas, staying on Ted's dollar in nice hotels.
That's awesome.
You know, so I mean, it was, and I just think that, you know, when that, you know, we were on the road a lot. Lex and I were on the road, traveling together like constantly, and we're still doing about 200 days a year back then. And you know, he hooked up with Liz on the road, and they, you know, got into a romance, and I think that, you know, I mean, they fell in love. And she died, and I think that, you know, she died right in front of him. I couldn't even, and I don't think that he recovered from it, and I don't blame him. I mean, it's my wife died in front of me, and I think it would definitely affect me.
Did anybody know that Liz had a problem at all, or
anybody that was in her inner circle?
Right.
I mean, I knew.
Right.
You know, but you know, it's like going to a crack house.
Right.
You know, look around, everybody, you know. Hey, can I get a rock? We all got a problem. I mean, everybody had a problem.
I guess at what point, getting back to WWF, we'll talk about WCW coming up. At what point do you think the Kliq gained power? Because is it true that at one point you guys all threatened to strike and Vince had to be called to house shows?
No.
No, yeah.
No. I just think that was we're in Indianapolis and we called from a Coco's restaurant, and this was shortly after that whole thing happened up in Montreal.
Right.
We just one after another. And at this point, Hunter was with us. I think Hunter was undefeated. And we just one after another talked to Vince on the phone. And I think as he looked at it, it was just like, wow, that's 5 matches on my card tonight that are, that would be, screwed with if these guys did decide to do something. We just basically vented our displeasure with some of the things that were happening. So they came down, they flew down and we met in a hotel and then we went to Columbus that night. And, but Vince, I remember one time we were up in Canada and all the guys, said, you've got to break this Kliq up. And this is when we would go to the building early and put Kliq on a thing and then stick them on the door and then leave, and then come back later. And the guys would think these guys, they got their own locker room.
Right.
I mean, we were looking. I mean, it was, we were looking to get some heat, and we had it. I mean, Shawn had so much heat. It was, I think the reason he brought me in the first place was just to really be a bodyguard.
What happened with you guys and Shane Douglas?
I didn't have any problems with him. I mean, I think the other guys drove him crazy. He came in he was touted like the number one pick. He was, the big ECW star, and he came in with pretty high expectations. And he went out in Cincinnati, and the first night he had a house show was with Kid, and Kid was always the barometer.
Right.
If you could go, and Kid came back and they didn't have a very good match, and Kid just went, gave the double armpit he ain't got it, and that's
Right.
So
we did an interview with Shane, and Shane said that he also worked Scott, and Scott sandbagged him a lot and stuff.
Scott never sandbagged anybody.
Right. That's what Shane said. So
yeah, I've worked with Scott after we drank 40 beers apiece on the way from Manchester. He didn't sandbag it that night, and that was with a friend. So.
Chris Candido, he had told us also on his interview that you guys were really hard on him and stuff like that. I guess the question would be, why were you so hard on Chris?
I don't remember being hard on him.
Right. I don't know.
Probably because his girlfriend was sleeping with everybody in the territory, and he was acting like he didn't know what was going on. So you walk around like a dumb stooge. I don't remember. That's the whole thing. These guys say stuff like that. I'm like, I don't remember being hard on him.
Is it true that you came into the offices one night and found out as champion that you weren't making as much as Taker and Bret?
Oh, I might have. Where'd you hear that story from?
I forgot. I really did forget.
Yeah, that was. I had access to the office.
What was your reaction? Did you speak up about it?
Or? Never. Knowledge is power.
Right.
Why would I play? It's just like I had a Royal Straight Flush in my hand. I just waited, and then lo and behold, I wrote down payments every night I would find out what the house was. It was $75,000-$80,000. Then I'd write what I got paid when my check came for the breakdown, and I'd cross-reference it. I mean, it wasn't stupid,
right?
And all of a sudden, payments just started and. So I said, well, what's the other? And this is back when, the thing about the Kliq was how we had, the power with Vince was always that he could always play the boys against each other. And we were the first group of guys that got our SummerSlam check and went, what'd you get? What? You fucking got $25,000, you weren't even in the match. I got 15.
All right. Like Paul Ellering was getting more than half the boys.
Yeah, so that was the whole thing. It was just so once you know that, once again, knowledge is power. So then it's just like you call JJ, and Hold on, I'll get Vince. And Vince, oh, I wasn't aware of that. Oh, yeah, you didn't sign off on it. You were so stupid. Well, gee, could you look into it? Maybe give me some more money? So, and they were doing that a lot. And then all of a sudden, we get phone calls and, hey, want to go to WCW? Guaranteed money, $750. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you all about that coming up. What do you remember about the night at King of the Ring when Hogan wouldn't put Bret over?
It was like the first time I really witnessed like that whole, that sabada that era of guys did. It was just, that doesn't work for me, brother. Doesn't work for me, brother. But, at that point, we knew, the rumor was he was leaving. And he wouldn't do business, which was hurting our business.
Right.
So, he wasn't a very beloved guy in that locker room. Hogan wasn't. And Bret was our guy, and Bret was staying. So our alliance was to Bret. But it was bogus, It definitely hurt business.
What are your memories of the Good Friends, Bitter Enemies match?
Which one was that?
Joe, do you remember that?
It was Shawn versus what was it?
That was me and Shawn, but was that another match we had?
I think that was that's what I was talking about, was the big one. Because it's still, talked about today.
I wonder if that's the one from Omaha.
It might have been. I think that's the one.
That's probably the one.
That's
That's one of my top 3 favorite matches I've ever had.
That was my next question. Do you think it was one of the best matches you ever had?
It was just by far. That
was the one from In Your House.
Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said something on a commentary of a DVD at one time about guys today not understanding the psychology to pull that off. Can you expand on that? As far as
You pull that match off?
Yeah, to pull their matches off. We were talking earlier about how they're just
somewhere I think a lot of it goes to that ECW psychology, where you hit a guy with a pool table, you hit a guy with a laser beam, you drop a hydrogen bomb on him, he kicks out at 2.5 on all of them, then you sunset flip him or small package him and beat him. It's just kind of like, you can't distend the beliefs. You can't make the people in the crowd go, I'm watching fake wrestling. You just can't do that. When somebody hits you, you have to register the fact that you've taken damage. And, these guys go toe-to-toe, and they go bang, 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 back and forth with these, bare fist punches, and, like, nobody sells it. And it's just like, okay, well, I know I'm watching something that's bogus. And I think, it's the same thing, these guys, you got a guy in a pinning predicament, and you go to the top rope to do something, and then you miss it. It's just like in a bar fight, and you got a guy down, you're kicking the shit out of him. You don't go jump up and jump off the top of the bar. There's just that, and people always say, well, that's because you can't do that. No, it's not that I can't do that. I had to, they made me do all kind of crazy stuff. I had to jump off the top. I jumped off the top rope one time in a crappy match with Bagwell at center stage. But to have athleticism for just that, just to do that, it's just like, I don't know.
All right. We'll talk more about that because I'm going to ask you some stuff about TNA later on. I guess you talked about leaving WWF and you got an offer from WCW. The farewell to the Kliq, everybody still talks about that today because it was shot by handheld at MSG. In retrospect, do you think it was fair to the rest of the boys that you guys did that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We, it's like anything else. We helped build that place as much as anybody else did. That was the 4 of us that did that night were in the main event and semi-main event. It's the first time they sold the Garden out in, I don't know how many years, 8, 9 years,
right,
for a house show. So, that was our blood that we spilled, and that was those fans that stayed loyal to us. And I felt that I was leaving for money, and it was hard for me to do because I loved where I was. I loved being in the WWF. And we felt that we built that place, that we built that together. and the Kliq was a big part of that. And so and it wasn't televised.
Right.
You know, it wasn't televised. It was a house show.
Right.
You know, yeah, it was a house show in the garden, but it was still a house show. And we asked if we could do it.
I was going to ask, how did the agents react?
We asked Vince. Vince said, fine.
Where did all the heat come in at?
All the heat came because after we did it, the boys we'd left, we were done.
Right.
And the boys just started stirring it, because now they knew the Kliq was dissolved. So now, okay, they're weak, let's go after him. Can't go after Shawn, he's got the strap. All the heat goes on Hunter.
Right.
So.
Memories and thoughts of when Warrior came in before you guys left. What are your thoughts on Jim as a person?
I like Jim.
Right.
You know, he's insane. You know, a fucking nut, but he's drew money, man. He drew money running down the ring, shaking the ropes and doing clotheslines. He drew money.
All right.
You know.
Now we'll talk about WCW. How did the whole jump come about?
Dallas was like Dallas once again, it's like anything else in the business. Dallas was our friend, and Dallas kind of brokered the deal to Scott and then to me. It was funny because Scott and I didn't know, because we were told to just ultra kayfabe it.
Right.
And we were in the locker room somewhere, and Scott looked at me. We're in the shower, and he looked over at me and goes, "Dude, I'm so fucking out of here." I looked at him. I said, "I'm gone too." I said, "I signed a deal memo." We just looked at each other, and we were just like, "No, I can't hug. We're nude." But it was nice because I was thinking, man, I'm going to go out there with myself, and he was thinking the same thing. But going up there together was just.
What was Vince's reaction to you guys both leaving?
My whole deal was I talked to Vince, and I went on vacation with my wife to the Panhandle in Florida. And just kind of did the whole soul searching, because back then you had to put in writing within 90 days that you weren't going to let your contract roll. So I had to do that. So I wrote a really nice letter to Vince, typed it up and FedExed it, but called him before he got it and said, "Hey, I just want to tell you, I signed my this paper. I signed it not for it to turn over, but I want to talk to you in Stockton, which was the next TV." So we walked outside the building, and I just told him. He said, "Do you mind me asking what you got?" And I said, $750, $850, $950. And he just shook his head, and I said, "If you can match it, I'll stay." And he said, "I can't match that." He said, "If I pay you that, I'm going to have to pay every guy in that locker room." I said, "We don't have that kind of money as a company." I said, "I understand." He says, "Well, we're family." I said, "My wife is, at this point, she's 6 months pregnant." I said, "I can't be on the road 300 days a year."
Right.
So I can't do it. I'm not going to do it with the rest. I said, they promised me 185 days a year as a max. And I said, it's guaranteed money. I said, I can buy a bigger home because I know how much money I've got coming in. I said, I'm not living week to week and waiting for WrestleMania payoff. I said, I can be almost like normal. And he wished me well, and I left.
Was there an open door basically to come back in the future?
Yeah, we stayed, Vince and I always, I felt that Vince and I have always had a good understanding. I always liked Vince, It's like anything else, there's times you want to strangle him. I'm sure there's times he wanted to strangle me, but,
right.
I always have thought that he's, and I was blessed to be a top guy. So he's, people that can make him money, I'm sure he's a lot more nicer too, but. And generally, I've seen a side of Vince a lot of people haven't had a chance to see. And even when his daughter, when at his daughter's wedding, he was giving his daughter away. We had just some time to talk. During that weekend, it was I saw a different side of Vince. There is a human there with the people.
Who came up with the nWo gimmick?
That was Eric Bischoff's.
Okay.
Eric Bischoff's idea. He ran it by me in Scottsdale, and it didn't sink in. And then I went home that night. He stayed in my house. Went home that night, and I just sat there the middle of the night. I just kept playing through. I was just thinking, fans are going to think that Vince is invading. this company. This is really going to be huge. You know, and we had no idea. I mean, of course you're thinking this is just your entry level angle. Like this is just to get you in the door, and this won't last very long. And the biggest thing was we couldn't use our names.
Did that bother you at all, or?
Yeah, I took care of that though. You know, as soon as they said, "What do you want to go by?" I said, "You know, I'd like to go by my name because I knew I'd own that for life, no matter where I went."
Right.
And even when I went back to New York, you know, they really kind of wanted to do the Diesel thing, but you know, just like I wasn't going to get into that again. I wasn't going to be owned.
Was Hogan originally part of the plan?
No, they didn't know who it was going to be. Originally, it was Sting, I think.
Wow.
Sting was going to jump and turn. So they didn't think Hogan would do it. Hogan was doing that movie, and then with Lonnie Anderson and somebody else. And I think Hogan watched the TV and saw that train leaving.
Right.
Hogan, man.
Yeah.
I mean, what anybody says about Terry, man, there's nobody smarter than him.
Yeah.
He said, "Man, ka-ching, I'll hop on that. I'll be the, you know," and it was fine.
What are your memories of I guess, in the beginning, how it first played out? I mean, were you happy with the way?
No, because, you know, it was, you know, we went in to do these interviews, and, you know, he's that old school ramble, you know. Scott and I were soundbite guys.
Right.
You know, we were trying to keep it real, and, you know, we didn't want to do it like a wrestling angle. We thought the thing to make this thing work would be like to be anti-wrestling, anti-everything. And so the first day we went to we're in Disney MGM, and we did the first black and white thing. And when it was over with, halfway through we took a break, and Scott and I went over, looked at each other, and we're like, "Fuck, man, he's killing us. He's just rambling about everything. It's just not working." So we went to Eric that night. We went and ate some food with Eric, and Terry went back to Tampa. We were stuck in the hotel, and we just said, "Man, this isn't working." You know, he said, "You know, Neil Pruitt's got some ideas how he can chop it up." And that's when they did that edited black and white, you know, really kind of edgy, and it worked. And then that way there, and that was the whole thing. I mean, Eric did such a good job of managing those egos and making things work.
I'm going to ask you about all that. Yeah, definitely.
You know, he really did. I mean, it wasn't it was definitely water and oil with Hulk and Scott and I.
I was going to ask you, as far as Eric Bischoff is concerned, did you guys get along with him? Because this is now the first time that you guys were working with him, and as far as like...
Yeah, I liked him. Eric is still a friend of mine. I mean, I consider Eric a friend of mine.
And I'll ask you about the politics between, you know, Hogan and you guys later on, definitely. How did the other boys react when you guys came back to WCW?
Well, they weren't happy. You know, the rumors, you know, I mean, we were making Sting money.
Right.
You know, nobody else was making that kind of money. And I think it was one of those situations where, you know, every time we'd say something, we'd say, "Well, in New York, this is the way we do it. In New York, this is," and we're just like, "So, like, fuck, shut these guys up." But it was different, you know. These guys worked part-time. You know, they didn't really run house shows.
Right.
They didn't draw.
It was a different animal.
Yeah, it really was. It was just like, you know, it was like we were Navy SEALs, you know.
Right.
We'd been pretty much battle-tested, you know.
What happened, or what are your memories between the match with you, Scott, and the Nasty Boys? Jerry said that you guys worked a little bit stiff, or Scott worked stiff with them in the ring.
The one when all the shit happened?
Yeah.
Nah, he's such a liar. No, what happened? This is the story of this whole thing that showed his ignorance. Jerry had a bad neck, and it was known to Scott and I, and to Knobs, and to Jerry, of course, who had the bad neck. And Jerry had talked to JJ, and JJ said, "Just go work the match." And I heard JJ say that to him. I was right there in the room. So we worked the match, and it's Scott threw a chair at Jerry, and Jerry didn't see it. And it was like a bowling chair, not a folding chair, but like a plastic Brunswick chair. And he threw it, and Jerry didn't see it through the lights, and it came and hit him. Gave him like a stinger. He scooted in, and, you know, Scott thought he was going to feed him the comeback. And Sags went in and just beat him up, potatoed him. By the time Scott knew what happened, he was bleeding. Because, us working stiff, Jesus. Those guys, I mean, they couldn't work light if they wanted to. So, but anyway, they ended up suing us out of this whole thing. And instead of just, as soon as he got hit with that chair, if he would have crumbled and said, hey, like the worst thing you can do is go after the boys.
Right.
He wasn't smart enough to realize he had a company.
Yeah.
And I think he ended up getting he got fired or got let go or whatever it was, probably from a $300,000 or $400,000 a year spot. Got nothing in settlement, maybe $100,000 or $200,000.
Right.
Just a really poor business, and went after us. Went after me and Scott, and we were. I always considered him a friend up until then. I don't dislike the guy. I just think he made some really, made some bad choices in his life.
What happened between you and Roddy Piper after one of the TVs at Nitro?
It was in Boston. Sat in the back. We were going towards Moline for a pay-per-view, and we sat in the back with him and Rick and said, no matter what we do tonight, we can't start this angle. Can't start the match hot. We'll have nowhere to go, and we'll have nowhere to go when we go to Moline pay-per-view. So we all agree, and we kind of get an idea of what we're going to do. We go out there, and Piper attacks. Just does the exact opposite thing, and I'm trying to cut him off, to throw him outside. He won't sell anything I'm doing. It turns into a clusterfuck. And we got in the back, and I just was in the locker room, and Hogan stirred me, and I went in there just to confront him, like, what the fuck are you thinking? And he jumped up like he was going to come, so I just open hand smacked him.
Right.
I just smacked him. And that was it. I just knocked him down, and he didn't want nothing to do with me, and I felt like a fucking bully, Because his reputation was he was this badass, and it was almost like he'd been selling wolf tickets all this time. I hit him, and I think Eric thought he was a badass, and then Eric was like, Jesus, that was it? Because Eric thought I was insane, which I probably was. But just really a bad decision on my behalf.
Did you guys make amends later on?
We've never sat down and said, hey, I'm sorry, Rod, for doing that. But we've become friends. I mean, it's, we'll put it behind us. But it was just a really poor decision on my behalf.
How upset was Arn Anderson and the rest of the Horsemen after you guys did the imitation?
Not at all. They weren't. When we came back, it was everybody's laughing. It was funny, and then all the people in Arn's family and friends and people like that just stirred him, and it wasn't done to be malicious.
All right.
Okay.
At the time, why was it so hard to get Shawn TV time in WCW?
Waltman?
Shawn Waltman.
They said he couldn't talk.
All right.
He wasn't a good talker. He was just a good worker.
Were you surprised that the angle with DDP got over as much as it did?
No, because we knew. I mean, that was almost a can't miss situation because nobody had gotten to us. Nobody really got to Scott and I.
All right.
And whoever that first person was knighted.
Right.
I mean, he was going to pull the sword out of the stone. That was definitely an Excalibur moment. And the thing was that when we, determined it should be Dallas, because Dallas was getting over on his own.
Super.
He was getting over. He was kind of the people's choice, and it was the same old thing. Buddy system. He'd been there for us. It's like okay, now time to do one for you.
Right.
Which was but it wasn't just that. It was like it was the right thing to do. Right thing to do. Right guy. Just so happens to be a friend, which makes it really rewarding for Scott and I. And like I said, he had done Scott some really positive things when Scott was down and out with a child and in Germany, and so it was nice, and it was great to see it work. And Dallas worked his ass off.
Definitely. I was going to ask you, were you guys more or less booking? Like a lot of people say you guys were in Bischoff's ear, and people say that you and Scott basically were using Bischoff as a pawn during that time period. What do you say to your critics who say that?
every night that I remember us going over things that we were involved with, there was always 7 or 8 people in the room. And people were throwing ideas around. Now, were our ideas better and they went with them? Obviously they were. But it wasn't, it wasn't that we sat secretly and whispered. We don't work like that.
Right.
We don't work like that. I've never, ever been one of those guys that lobby. I'll pitch an idea. If you don't like it, I'm not going to come to you 50 times with it.
Right.
Just like, dude, because I know how it is when people do it to you. It's just like, okay, I heard your idea. I don't particularly like it.
Right.
But you don't want to ever say that to anybody. But it's just like if it doesn't materialize, chances are that it's a shits. Or they don't understand it, which is 90% of the time. They just don't understand it. It's too non-wrestling for them to understand.
Huh.
But, no, I mean, we had ideas. I mean, we're really into it.
Was there a lot of political tension between you guys and Hogan and, Bischoff being in the middle?
Yeah, because, Hogan had Hogan's deal was, it was so ridiculous in his favor. They gave him a contract that
He had creative control. I think.
yeah, and then not only that, he got paid like a certain amount of dollars for every pay-per-view, whether it drew or not, and so he was always on top. And it was such like when I later booked. That alone, that contract killed me.
Right.
Because you couldn't get a hold of him. He'd come in at 6 o'clock, show went on at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock live, and he'd just say, he's in 5 segments, and he says, bro, it doesn't work for me. And here you are scrambling to, it's, people think it's so easy. It's just like, man, those segments are timed, and, so you've got to come up, and then you've got to get guys to fill those spots. And
How much tension did that cause between you and Hulk?
none, because that was his deal.
Right.
He was smart enough to have that deal. That's not between Terry and I. That's between whoever signed the papers.
Right.
God bless him. I've always said that. God bless anybody that can get more money than me, get my spot. God bless you. Go for it. Because I'm not going to sit and let you.
Right.
So if you're better than I am, you're smarter than I am, and you're better at this game than I am, then God bless you. But
It's good philosophy.
yeah, I haven't seen many guys that get over me. Get over on me.
What about the Giant? Memories of your matches with the Giant? And there was a rumor that one night you were supposed to put him over and you didn't show up for the match.
Yeah, I didn't put him up for the match. I didn't show up for the match because I was in North Scottsdale Hospital because I had irregular heartbeat. But yeah. I've also had a couple of knee operations, I think an elbow operation to get out of doing a job. I'm going to the knife not to do a job.
Right.
My MO in this business is one thing Nash won't do is jobs. Who hasn't beat me?
Right.
Who hasn't beat me? These things are. Eric's calling me. I'll fly I'll send a private jet. I said, dude, I'm in the hospital. My tests haven't come back. I'm going in for a nuclear PET scan in the morning. I don't think I put nuclear dye in my heart just because I don't want to do a job to the Giant.
So I guess my question would be, do you think that the art of doing a job and helping get someone over is lost today and pretty much misunderstood?
Yeah, but it's like the Steve Austin deal where he gets the TV one day and there's, hey, you're going to lose to Brock Lesnar.
Right.
It's like, well, I'm sorry, aren't we in a business that's supposed to create like revenue? Like, couldn't you get some money out of this instead of give it away for free, non-advertised?
Right.
So as one of the boys, sometimes you go like, okay, but at the same token, I've been on the other side of it where you're sitting in a room and there's 9 guys in a room trying to put together television, and and all 9 people have writer's block. Nobody's coming up with an idea. You've got to get something on paper because you've got to get it to production. You've got to do this. And sometimes shit comes out. That's just what happens in the creative process, because it's not like you're writing an album and you're sitting around and you got 9, 12, 15 months to put some songs down. It's just, you've got to put something down. And back then it was a 3-hour show that we were doing. But and it just, from a creative standpoint, I always look at things. I think that was good for me because I really have a different respect for the creative aspect now.
As far as we're talking about also, this goes back to what we were just talking about a second ago with the politics. Like, was there a lot of struggling between you, Scott, and Hogan for power and creative control at all, or was it?
We didn't have. There was no chance for us to get creative control.
Okay.
I know that we knew that we had the cool factor, like we were hip, and he just wasn't hip.
Right.
So I mean, it was like, either we could smarten him up to pop culture, and then he could smarten us up to how to get more money. It was like it became almost a synergy there that because we got several big like raises during the time of this. Like we found out how much he was really making one night when we were all fucked up, and it was just like, what? You're making that? Well. Then we went into Bischoff and said, we're going to quit unless you bump our pay up.
Wow.
So
how did that work out for you guys?
We got that was that big $6.5 million contract we got or whatever.
Do you think Hogan used you guys at all, or do you guys feel that you ever used him?
I would hope so.
Right.
I mean, we'd be the only ones in the business that he didn't.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of the way it works.
Nature of the business.
Yeah. I mean, I know I used him big time, and when he walked down that aisle and joined us.
Right.
I mean, that was when you went to NAPT and all those other places. I mean, if you were standing next to Hogan with the same shirt he had on, you were, whether they knew you or not, they knew who the hell he was. If there's anybody with a higher Q rating than Hogan.
Getting back to Scott Hall, around this time period, there's like lots of rumors about his, I guess, behavior outside the ring and stuff like that. I know he's your friend and stuff like that, so I don't know how deep you want to go into this. But when do you think Scott's abuse to like alcohol started getting out of control and maybe affected business?
I think when he got divorced.
Okay.
When he got divorced, and because I think a lot of times that family really kind of keeps you, tight. So I think when his divorce was, and then it was a back and forth thing after that for years. They got remarried, blah 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 blah. And I just think that he got into that, and he'd always had a tendency to lead that way. But I just think that when there wasn't somebody there to really say, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, and he was just kind of, just think that the demons finally got him.
Did anyone ever say anything to you about it, like at the time, saying?
Oh yeah, I was.
And you guys pretty much just tried to do what you could.
Yeah, well, like I've always told people, and I've tried to help Scott numerous times, but if I watch Scott for 20 hours, sooner or later I got to sleep.
Right.
And he knows that once you go down, he's a vampire. He'll be on the prowl.
Do you think Eric Bischoff around this era was in over his head?
I think anybody would have been. I just think that there were so many egos. And see, Eric had always, since day one, had been fighting Turner. Been fighting the Time Warner people.
Right.
The only reason Eric got that Monday night spot was they were sure that it would fail against Vince. They could finally get rid of pro wrestling. That was the key. They were like, yeah, you can have it. You want to go head to head against them? Yeah. Huh. You'll fail, and we can finally get rid of pro wrestling. And then it was a success. I mean, people, it's like that. There's a book about the death of WCW that just, I've never read it because it's just, the wrestling people live in such a bubble that they don't realize that there was a .com crash, that AOL came in, took over Time Warner, that a $73 stock dropped to $15, that AOL sold everything they could. I mean, they sold the Braves, the Hawks, they sold everything, But I booked WCW to its death. I personally did it. Not the .com crash, not, AOL merger, none of these things that took over. I was there when Bischoff knew that, man, it was just a matter of time before they were going to pull the plug out because they wanted to. And that guy came in, what the hell was his name? Jamie, whatever his name was. I mean, he specifically said, I'm going to get wrestling off TNT. And they brought him in. He was head of programming. So it was like...
Well, this is great because we'll lead to my next question. What do you think should have been done differently in WCW to avoid the collapse when Vince, basically took over in the ratings and all that?
The number one thing we should have done, they got so greedy. Thunder was the worst thing you could do.
Right.
Thunder was our Waterloo. I mean, just doing Thunder was just, it was just a nightmare, and it was, you know, it was a momentum killer because it was a branded product that wasn't taken to the same consideration the Nitro show was. It was taped, just, you know, just a horrible idea. Taking Nitro to 3 hours was brutal. You know, they just bastardized it, you know.
Do you think it overexposed the product too?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. It was nothing. There was nothing. When you booked it, you were booking, you know, almost 10 hours of original programming a week for all the different, you know.
And you gave a lot of stuff away for free too.
Gave everything you had to. You know.
I was going to ask, did it become frustrating when the NWO kept expanding too, with different members? You know, it started out with just.
You know, it was actually kind of amusing for a while because it was like a waiting. Like, how do we get somebody over? Throw them a T-shirt.
Right.
You know, and it worked. It worked for a long time. And then there was like the Mexican World Order. Then it was like 75 World Orders on our show.
And Piper had his icon shirt.
Yeah, you know, so it's just. But I look at it and I say, you know, name. I can't name an angle in wrestling that had legs like that thing did.
Yeah, it was all.
That just continued. And anytime it resurfaced, it would have worked at WWF when we came back. If they wouldn't have broke us up.
I'm going to ask you about that coming up.
Yeah, it would have worked.
When they let, I guess, Scott Hall go for a little bit and get time off, what led you going on TV and campaigning for him to return?
Nobody told me I couldn't.
All right. Did you get heat for that at all?
All the time. But they never told me, we'll fire you if you say this.
All right.
Because then I was going to go into my freedom of speech and, you know. And it was good for TV because it gave us that, you know.
Perfect for the characters.
Yeah, it was what they wanted. Then they started, you know, Russo came in and basically told me, you know, bring up Scott, bring up Scott, which was great for him.
Knowing that he's going to come back eventually, or?
Yeah.
Right. How'd you like Vince Russo working with Vince?
I liked Vince. I still work for him now.
Right.
He, you know, he gets it. He just he just always has somebody pulling, you know. He never gets to do what he wants to do. He always has somebody monitoring. When he came up to WCW, you know, we had a standard and practice guy sitting in our booking room, you know, that just really kiboshed 90% of the stuff that you would even try to throw out. So it was, he got there and realized it was, you know, it wasn't going to work.
A lot of people say people like yourself and Scott gave Bill Goldberg bad advice when he came to WCW. How do you respond to that?
We gave him bad advice. We gave him our agent. He went from making $75,000 to about $3 million a year. Well, that's bad advice. God, give me some.
All right. Were you surprised when Bret showed up?
No.
Okay.
No. We had a favored nations. We were so glad he asked for $3 million. We were making $1.3 million. We got a favored nations in our contract. We were like, sure, bring Bret in.
So you got
Yeah, we'll take more money.
People said that you and Scott tried to play politics with him behind the scenes and tried to hold him back. Is that true at all? Or
no, I didn't even work with him. I don't think I did one angle with Bret. But I think Bret was with me for a while. We redid the NWO and Bret was in it.
Right, I do remember that. Is it true that I guess you guys tried to make Hogan a commissioner at one point?
I wanted to.
Right.
When I was booking, I wanted to make Hogan a commissioner.
Why did that never come about?
Because it killed that whole money thing in his contract, where he got, you know, so many hundreds of $1,000s for the pay-per-view and this and that, and you know, it was a great idea because, you know, he needed some time away from the ring, but I still wanted to use him in 6 or 7 segments of the 3 hours. And also, you know, I just wanted to get some, like almost, I was going to make him the president.
Right.
Where he was going to be the president of World Championship Wrestling, not the commissioner.
Do you think it would have worked?
I don't know. I think him in a suit would have been pretty sweet. And you know, and it looked like he was going to be the good guy, but he, you know, underneath it was actually, you know, stirring the shit. It gave you a catalyst to write your TV off of.
Right.
So we just had to make Flair crazy instead.
Did you like that angle with the whole Ric Flair?
Like I said, you know, we couldn't do anything that had sex in it because Standards and Practice wouldn't let us. We couldn't do anything that had any kind of alternative lifestyle or anything. I mean, we were so bound to what we could do that the only thing we could do was comedy. And comedy in a wrestling show really doesn't work, but if it's your only avenue, I mean, it's just basically you have to look at it and say, what are our avenues that we're going to be able to entertain with? Well, we'll be able to use comedy, we'll be able to use violence.
Right.
We can't use sex.
Going back to Bret real quick, did he change at all in WCW as far as like what he once was? And do you think
I think that what happened to him in New York changed Bret. It had nothing to do with WCW. I think that Bret was so loyal for so long, and when they screwed him, I just think that it broke his heart.
Right. Do you think WCW misused him at all?
Absolutely.
Okay. What would you have done differently with Bret?
I put the belt on him. I'd have a run.
Mm-hmm.
There was a heel factory. He could have went through me, Scott, Hogan. There could have been so many guys that he would have been. I wasn't booking.
What are your memories of working with Sting?
Great athlete. Steve never never loved the business. It was never, he liked it, made him a good living. But Steve was fun. I mean, he liked to have fun out there, but he was a great athlete. He was really easy, had great fire, really good fire. And he's always been a really good friend of mine.
Right.
So I always enjoy just hanging around. He's one of the few guys that makes me laugh.
How about Booker T?
I thought he was great. Good athlete.
Was it true you and Scott were on double secret probation at all?
We were on double secret probation a couple of times. Yeah. We were on. We got pulled. We used to call it getting pulled into the office. We get pulled in the office every couple of TVs. We told we'd be sent home. They actually sent Scott to rehab.
Right.
After one time. They sent him to rehab.
When I guess Eric Bischoff was demoted and Vince Russo came in, did you see the politics between both of those guys? And what jealousy factor?
I thought they worked pretty well together. I thought that they worked well together under the circumstances. Eric has an ego, but Eric's not. He's pretty easy. If you don't lie to Eric, like if you tell Eric, you're a prick, I don't like you. Obviously, you're a prick too. Then that night he'll say, hey, you prick, want to get a beer? Right. Eric's that kind of guy. So it's like, if you're honest with Eric, I mean, there was a lot of times Eric and I argued, and Scott and Eric, but we always liked him. We always respected him. I always thought he had, Eric has a really good mind for it. It's hard for you. He has to visualize. If he can't visualize it, it won't work for him. But if he visualizes it, if you can explain it and make him visualize it, and he has to visualize it like he'll see it on a TV screen, which took a while for me to understand. If you can explain it to him like that way, he can actually see it because he's so visual. It's just like, bam, and then he and his mind will always enhance the idea. He really, he's got a really good mind for the business. I mean, name a person in this industry that's had Vince McMahon on the ropes.
There isn't anybody.
Just him.
Yeah.
Just him.
People say that they had no idea who was in charge in WCW. Is that accurate?
No.
Okay. People knew who to go to.
I knew who to go to.
All right. What are your thoughts on Kevin Sullivan as Booker during the time Russo was sent home?
Kevin was great when we came in. Kevin knows how to book heat. Kevin is really good at booking heat. If you want to get heels over, he'll book heat and he'll book it to it just absolutely just gags you that you want to watch that babyface make a comeback. And they actually pulled we started giving back earlier than he wanted to, just because the baby faces were all in Bischoff's office crying, show after show. How much more heat are they going to get on us?
All right.
And Sullivan would say, brother, it's not ready. Because his whole thing was you put, the heat was like putting air in a balloon, and as the balloon rised, you had to get more and more heat on it. He said, when it gets 5 feet off the ground, you don't want to start taking air out of it. You want to get all the way up, and then that's how much, then the higher you bring it, the longer it takes for that balloon to get back to the ground. And then he said, then the heat's done, and you got to recreate the heat. So that was his thing. And when he explains that to you, and you go, especially when you're a heel, like, it works for me.
Yeah, exactly.
More heat, good for us. No bumps.
Memories of working with Terry Funk.
Great. There's very few pictures I have, like, up in my house or anything, but I have a picture of Terry bleeding hit me with a chair in my house.
Huh.
I always thought that he's a really good guy.
What are your thoughts of Tank Abbott? And did anyone ever feel that he was going to start shooting on people in the middle of a match at all, or no, it was all business?
No, he was all business. They did something. Robbie smacked him one day, and like he was in the audience, and Robbie punched him. You know, because Robbie was. I don't think there's many guys that beat Robbie Steiner. He's all beat up now and old and a school board guy, but you know, Robbie was a pretty good measuring stick, and you know, I think they kind of had a little tit for tat. And I didn't see Tank come in the back, and I saw Tank pretty much get his bag and leave that night. So,
in an interview, you once said that Scott and yourself were just big dicks in regards to the NWO versus Wolfpack feud. Can you expand on that?
it got to the point where it's just like, because everybody was so the quagmire was so deep, and everybody was working their own angles, that it's just like, you know, it's one of those deals like, all right, well, if everybody's going to be a dick, then watch this. You know, watch it. When you see dicks, we'll really be dicks.
All right.
You know, we won't go over matches. We won't go over interviews. We'll just go out there and shoot on you. Shoot interviews, say whatever you want to say, bury you. You know, like, you don't want to work with us, but I want to work with you. So we were just, there was substance abuse problems going on, and there were so many things going on with everybody. But, you know, I was at a point in my life, man, I'd come home and be out to dinner with my wife and, you know, fall asleep, with Selma's or something like that at the dinner table. And, you know, I was a mess. So I'm gonna say, man, it was just the drugs, man. It's the drugs, wasn't me. No, I was a dick.
All right. A lot of people we talked about earlier on about your booking was a big part that killed WCW, and you already kind of responded to that. But how do you respond when people say that you beat Goldberg too early?
I wasn't booking when Goldberg got beat.
So that wasn't even your...
That's the one thing that I love, you know. It's like, you know, I took over like in February. I beat Goldberg in December. You know?
Right.
I beat him in December. I started booking like February the 13th or 16th or something like that. It's just like, oh, Nash starts booking. I wasn't even booking. You know?
So the timetables were pretty much all messed up.
Worked for Bill. When Bill tells his story, I was booking.
Right.
You know? Yeah, but this is the thing that people say, oh, yeah, well, you beat Goldberg. I don't know, man. I was at the building every night when they were chanting Goldberg sucks. You know?
Right.
I'm like thinking, okay, so he's your top babyface. I never heard him chant Austin sucks. You know? He's your top babyface. He's undefeated. He's now the New York Yankees.
So you felt it was time to...
And it wasn't like I went out there and had a babyface beat him clean match.
Right.
We ran in more shit, did more to fucking protect him besides have Oswald shoot him from the book depository.
Right.
And then and I did it for... And then I turn around and give the belt away 4 days later, 5 days later? Yeah, because I wanted the run with the strap and I wanted the merchandise. I look like the biggest douchebag of all.
It's funny, though.
You know? I mean, how did that get me over? Explain how that gets me over.
Right.
I suffer way worse than Bill does.
That's my next question actually coming up. So, in retrospect, do you think that the one finger finish with Hogan was a good idea?
Would have been if Bill wouldn't have fucking put his hand through a limo a couple weeks later because he got all pissed off because Scott said something on TV. And he would have done it. He would have mowed through all of us to finally get to Hogan, beat Hogan, get the strap, get another run. You know, we had 7 months television planned right there. And he lost his head and put his fist through a window.
Whose idea was it for the one finger finish?
We all just kind of threw it around.
Did you think it was good for business, or?
Well, it put us where we needed to. You know.
Right.
I mean, to me, I went from kind of wow, I got this win over Goldberg, and I'm like soul searching. I find out that it wasn't a clean win. Geez, how can I make this right? I'll wrestle Bill again. Bill gets arrested because of something he does with Elizabeth. I know you're behind it, Hogan. This whole big crowd in the Georgia Dome thinks you're going to see this battle. I'm going to beat Hogan's ass, and I lay down. People got pissed, are still pissed about that because it worked. It worked because they're pissed. They're fucking pissed. It's like, fuck, you got me, and I hate you for it. It wasn't because what they wanted to see the Nash Hogan battle. Well, that would have been a barn burner.
How do you respond to Eric Bischoff in his book? He calls you big lazy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, he can say whatever he wants to say.
Do you know why he feels like that?
I think I'd lost my desire, to perform at that level. Just I did. I mean, it's not like it wasn't justified, but at the same token, it's like anything else. Wasn't too many guys in that hierarchy working harder than I was. I was still doing house shows. So,
speaking of them, you also worked with Scotty Steiner a lot around this time period. What are your memories of your matches with Scotty?
He was fun to work with. Good athlete. Believable, get heat on you. He was light too. He was always a light worker.
Do you think what went down at Bash between, I guess it was Bash, Great American Bash, it wasn't Bash at the Beach, between Jarrett, Hogan, and Russo was a big work? Or do you think it was a shoot?
I don't know.
Because I know there was a whole lawsuit.
I always felt it was work, but I'm a wrestler, so anything that happens out there, I think it's a work.
Right.
Including the Bret Hart thing, I still think it's a work.
Dude, really? Wow.
Yeah, but I think parts of it were. I think they turned it, I think it was, because when you watch that tape back, and they show Vince come out staggering like he's been punched. That was a Titan. That was a WWE tape. And Vince wouldn't show himself in that light unless he wanted to show himself in that light. So that had a work aspect of it. I think everything's work. It's always, you know what I mean? It's just like too much money that we're just going to shoot. I don't think so.
I guess at what point did you think to yourself, from a business standpoint, things were just spinning out of control in WCW? And when you heard that it was finally up for sale, how shocked were you?
It was up for sale, but it was up for sale to, Bischoff had brought Bischoff brought a group of guys in that would have paid, tenfold to what Vince paid.
Are you shocked that he didn't get it?
No, because they didn't want wrestling.
All right.
It wasn't about them, it was about them getting rid of it. It didn't matter to them. They just wanted to get rid of it. They just didn't want it. They didn't want to go to the Cable Ace Awards and say, so what's your number one rated program? Our number one rated program is wrestling. Even when we were at our demise, we were still the highest rated original programming they had.
Right.
How
did you find out that Vince finally bought WCW?
Somebody called me and said McMahon bought it. And they said, you're going to come to the last show in Panama City or whatever. They're all going to be there. And I said, nope.
Did you actually get to watch the final Nitro?
No.
No, okay. Did it? Okay. How did your contract situation work out?
I had 13 or 14 months left when he bought it. So it was like my biggest year. The contract was backloaded.
Right.
So they come to us and they say, we'll give you half your contract. I think my last year was a little over that. And we'll give you $1 million, 50 cents on the dollar. Then we'll give you $1 million guarantee on top of that. And you go back to work. I said, let me get this right. I can sit at home and make all my money, or I can give it back and go back to work and make the same amount.
Right. It makes no sense.
What? Like, how about this? How about I just stay at home and get it all?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and a lot of the marks, man, I think, God bless Dallas, but Dallas gave back half his money because he wanted to go to WWF.
Wow.
Booker did it too.
So you basically sat out, and how much time were you sitting out for again?
I think 13 months.
13 months. Wow. Okay. Do you think you would have been a part of the new WCW if Eric ever bought it?
Oh, yeah. I was counting on it.
Definitely.
I figured he'd get another 5-year run.
Were you surprised that Vince didn't keep it as a separate entity?
God, no.
You just knew that he probably didn't want anything competing with him. He always wanted.
I mean, to me, to this day, any guy that came over from that territory, you just beat them. Yeah, he just made sure that they looked as inferior to his talent as possible in the eyes of the fans.
He had to do it for business, I guess.
I look at it too, and people say, "Well, what would you do?" And I say, "You know what? It's like after the Civil War. I'm sure that the Confederates weren't, hey, nice to see you.
Right, exactly.
Come over, smack my guy around the TV. Wasn't going to happen.
Did you hear anything about the guys in the locker room from WCW going over there and how they were treated and stuff?
No.
How did you wind up back in WWE?
They wanted to do the NWO angle, and it was. I think Hogan was in and Scott was in, and they said they were going to do it. I said I'd do it.
I guess after the three of you guys appeared on TV together for the first time again, did you guys know that Hogan was not going to work as a heel?
No, that didn't transpire till the night before WrestleMania.
Right. What was your reaction to that?
Fuck! They painted us in a corner.
Right.
You're taking one of our guys. The original plan was we were going to beat Austin, and then Hogan would lose to Rock, but we would come down and beat Rock. Beat him up afterwards, get some heat on him.
Right.
And that'd be the last thing you see at WrestleMania would be the NWO standing over Rock. That was the game plan that I was told. And then day of WrestleMania, Scott's losing, Hogan's turning babyface, and him and Rock are making a comeback on me and Scott when we come down.
What was your reaction to that whole scenario?
I knew right then what
the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, I just felt, you sucked us in. So.
How did Vince treat you guys this time around?
I mean, he was, he's a pretty good poker face. I mean, I think it amazed everybody that we were as over as we were when we came back.
Is that why you think he might have killed it off real quick? Or?
Oh, they thought when we were in Chicago and Rock and Hogan went nose to nose that they would chant Rock, and they chanted Hogan.
All right.
There's a picture. We did that TV at Joe Louis, and we left Hogan and Austin lying, and the whole crowd standing. You got guys. I mean, I don't blame Rock or Steve, but you got guys that were there that took that company from when it was almost was on the ropes and took it and helped build it back to the number one wrestling company. And here you are telling, these two top guys, we're going to let these guys beat you. And they're going, fuck that. These are the guys that almost put us out of business. They're going to go over. Why? Why they get to go over?
Right.
And if I was Vince and Steve or Rock gave me that same, I would say, you're right. I do have to be loyal to you. So, I mean, I don't hold any grudges. I just think that it could have worked and we could have made money there, but it didn't.
How did the WWE boys react to you guys coming back in?
Oh, I heard that nobody wanted us back.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Did you?
But why would you? It's not like we're coming in mid-card.
Right, exactly.
So.
What are your thoughts about, I guess, Steve Austin? And is it pretty much true that he didn't want to work with any of you guys?
I think he would have worked with me. We're really good friends. I don't know that he was particularly fond of working with Scott. Steve was at a point in his life then. He was going through some shit personally, and he'd been carrying that wagon up there for a long time. With no time off, with bad neck. Steve's really was really beat up when we got up there. He was tired. Been through a lot, Man can only take so much. He's a tough son of a bitch. Steve's a good guy. Steve was on his wits' ends, and Wasn't a good time for us to come in. Wasn't a good time. They'd just beaten him with Jericho.
Right.
Jericho had beaten him and Rock the same night to get that unification belt. I think he was upset with that. He thought that was going to diminish, him. And then for us to come in and beat him down again, I think that he was, it was a wrong time for us to come in. I don't blame Steve at all. Steve's always been nothing but a pro. One of my dearest friends in the business. So I understand everything that he went through during that time period.
How was Scott's mind frame during all this when he went back?
We were supposed to work 10 days. I was supposed to work 12 days a month. That was my maximum. And we had gotten it where he was going to do 10. And I think he worked 23 the first month. He's got custody of both kids. They basically fucked him so royal. They lied. They said, we were not going to overwork you. And then it was just like we were at every house show.
Could you guys have said, contractual, we're not obligated?
Yeah, but it's like
then just kills yourself.
It's the same old thing. We're on our way to WrestleMania. We really need you guys.
Right.
When this is over, you'll go back to your regular schedule. We'll make it up to you. Yada yada yada. And after WrestleMania, when somebody gets hurt, oh, he's down. Can you pick up the slack?
Right.
It's always going to be like that. That's the nature of the business. I mean, it's a talent-driven industry. Right now they're in trouble because they've got a ton of talent down.
Yeah.
So just.
What are your thoughts on The Rock?
Really didn't get a chance to be around him that much. I know he's a great athlete. Really just a really great athlete, great charisma, good fire. I didn't get a chance to really know him that much.
What happened tonight in Philly where you tore your quadricep?
I went to go across. I think I just caught the back of Earl's heel a little bit and it just rotated my foot. I went to punch Bubba off and I just rotated my foot just enough. And, that I have so much scar tissue in my knees anyway. I just think that it tore.
It was an 8-man, right, I think?
Yeah. So, the thing was I just came off my bicep being torn. I didn't have my gear there. And they, I got to TV and me and Shawn went to a powerhouse gym where we're training and my cell phone rang. It was Stephanie and she said, can you work tonight? I said, no, I'm not cleared. I'm not medically cleared to work. And she said, well, I really need you. We got this 8-man, blah, 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 blah. And I said, I don't have my gear here. She said, is there any way you can get it? So I called Disco Inferno, who's back in Atlanta, to see if he could get my gear. He sent everything except my right knee brace. He couldn't find it.
Go figure.
I blew my right knee out.
Wow. That's
crazy.
crazy.
Left me.
If you do not get hurt that night, I guess, what do you think Vince would have done with the whole scenario with you guys?
I don't know. I think it would have worked. Because it would have been. I think anything. If they would have done anything to team me and Shawn, it would have worked.
Right.
And especially Hunter would have. We would have done like a Kliq thing.
Right.
Because we never did a Kliq thing. If we would have done that, I mean, I think people, there's that natural energy that friends have when they're out. I think one of the things that got Scott and I was when people would watch and they knew that we were actually friends.
And you could feed off each other. And stuff.
Yeah, it was just like you kind of finish their sentences. There's just that.
It was natural.
Yeah, it is. It's a quality when guys spend that much time together for so many years, and everybody likes a good buddy film. So it's just. It was a buddy film every week.
What are your thoughts on, I guess, your series with Triple H, and are you shocked at how he rose to the power?
No, why would I? He was brought into the business by the masters.
Right.
Why would I not think that he would be smart? No, you can't determine who you fall in love with. But he's, what, man, he's gotten, of all the people I know, he is genuinely probably one of the nicest human beings I've ever met in my life. Comes from a great family, great values, doesn't drink, smoke, doesn't do anything. I mean, like, if I had to pick somebody for my sister to marry, it would be Paul.
Right.
I mean, he is he's a sincere, really doesn't like badmouth people, will give you an opinion, give you an honest opinion, and then it's like, now it's like, he's like the Antichrist. I mean, when you talk to people, it's just like, people actually think that like he sits around and just like, oh, I'm going to fuck this guy over, I'm going to fuck that guy out. He don't care. You know, he's worried about what he's doing. I'll say, well, what I don't know. I don't know where that's going. I don't know.
All right.
You know, could you imagine going home and talking business with your wife all day? He doesn't do that.
Or Johnny Ace is the Antichrist up there now. Well, not.
Johnny Ace is too stupid to be the Antichrist.
What are your thoughts on Johnny Ace?
Besides the fact that he's fucking ignorant. I think he's a fucking stooge. This will probably help my employment there. No, I think he's a stooge. I'll just say one thing. He hired the wrong one-legged man. Okay? I mean, I don't have to say anything else.
Right.
You know?
What are your thoughts on, well, I guess going back to Vince real quickly, how did Vince change, I guess, from the last time you saw him, personally?
Last time I saw him?
When you went back the second time.
He looked so much older to me. You know, it looked like, you know, that he'd been through some battles. You know, you could just see he was a lot. And, you know, just, he was getting older, you know. I often think, you know, like because I've been successful and had money, you know, that other people in my family that aren't as fortunate have sometimes came to me for things.
Right.
And a lot of times you feel financially, you feel responsible for people that are in your family. And say my family's, you know, 17, 18 people, and maybe 8 of them are somehow financially I'm kind of responsible for it. They live in a house of mine or something like that. And to think what it must be like to get up every morning and have several hundred people that you're responsible for, and of those several hundred people, they've all got 20 or 30
right.
people in their families that they may be, you know, I mean, that to have that much pressure on a daily basis that he's responsible for. You know, people sometimes they look at this and they go, oh, well, you know, he did this. It's just like, dude, you know, there's times he has to make a decision that, you know, this guy is gone, this guy's gone, this guy's gone. He meets those families, he meets that wife, he sees those kids. You know, I said, people don't look into what, you know, they just, and as I say, it's the wrestling bubble. They see this guy on TV, they don't realize, man, this guy runs, you know, for a lot of times, for more years than not, a private business. Now, of course, it's public, and with going public, of course, there's a lot more wealth, but there's also a lot more responsibility and a lot more pressure. When they went public, I saw a drastic change in him. You know, because now Vince always had to answer to Vince. Now
right.
Vince has people that he has to answer to and he has to be accountable for. So that, you know, I think that, I bet you in retrospect, he would probably, I don't know, it's a lot of money, $1 billion, but I don't know. He may say, you know, F it. I'll keep it my company.
All right.
You know, but it's so much bigger now than it was when I was there. Even when I came back in 2003 or whatever it was, just from a worldwide market, you know, I mean, they got offices a lot. I mean, it's really, you know, it's such a bigger company.
All right.
You know.
Is it true that you actually were offered an office position and turned it down?
Yeah, but it was, you know, I knew what it was going to be. It was going to be eventually, you know, hey, you know, it'd be so much easier if you're up in Stanford.
Right. They wanted you in the office or a road agent or?
I wouldn't have been a road agent. I would have been like part of creative, which
right.
means you're up there. And I talked to Michael at that time. Michael Hayes was going back and forth to Atlanta, and I thought about it and I said, nah. I said, because I don't want. I mean, I live on the beach.
Right. You don't want to be up there.
Yeah.
It's all New York and traffic.
I live in a town, man, that if I drive 10 miles a day, it's a lot.
Huh. Are you surprised at Shawn's return since retiring?
No, because Shawn really, he had a lot of years off, you know. And he always, One thing about Shawn, boy, he'd take the summers off. He'd find some ailment or something. And
Right.
every summer, he'd take the summer off. So he had a lot of gas left in his tank. And then he didn't. When the money got good, he was, his back was bad. So I think Shawn needed, not that he was hurting for cash, but it was just like he didn't get that, he didn't get those $1 million years that everybody else got.
How close was Shawn ever to coming to WCW and joining? Never.
Never even crossed his mind.
Were there ever any talks recently to bring back the nWo to feud with DX?
I think that was more internet driven. I was under contract with TNA.
Right. Do you regret any of the things you've done in your past, looking back?
Oh God, I regret 1,000 things.
Anything that stands out in particular?
Could have been a nicer person, Could have not took as many pills. Could have not, could have opened the door for that old lady in Chicago when we were getting on the rental car and we said, "Fuck her, it's freezing." And there's a lot. There's a lot of things in your life that you do. I mean, I regret a lot of things. I haven't been the best husband. I haven't always been the best friend. But I like I say, I never got up any morning in my life and said with malice, "I'm going to do something to screw with this guy. I'm going to do something that." There were times that in the course of a day that that friction occurred, and I equate this business to being on a pirate ship. You sleep with one eye open at all times. It's
a good analogy.
This business is just what it is, and if you don't turn somewhat hard and be somewhat aggressive, you'll never make it to the top. I mean, it's just the way the business is. And it doesn't take you very long. If you're anywhere, I think the number one thing that you're going to do when you go to any environment is say, okay, what can hurt me? How do I survive? And, however you have to survive. And then once you realize that you can survive, okay, now how can I flourish? How can I become successful? How do I make it to the top? Well, in this business, man, we've always equated to a shark tank. If you're not the biggest, baddest great white, if you're some little lemon shark, that great white's going to bite you in half. So you've got to, and that's just the way it is.
Right.
And I didn't make this business. It was like that before I got in it. So, but that's just, you get in it and you realize that's the way it's going to be. And, now that I'm at a different point in my career, it's just like that I can't even believe that guy existed. Like I don't look in the mirror and see that guy anymore. And he's not there. Like I couldn't recreate that. I couldn't be that aggressive again. It's just not there.
I was going to ask you, do you still feel that you could be a big draw in today's world of wrestling, or
no?
Why is that?
I'm not healthy.
Okay.
I'm not healthy.
How did you wind up in TNA?
Been friends with Jeff for 100 years.
Right. Whose idea was it to feud with the X Division guys when you first came in there?
It was mine. It was always an idea that Madden that was with
Mark Madden.
Yeah, Madden always had it was one of his ideas. It was the cruiserweight bully, and Scott Hall used to pitch it every television. Like it would be like Eric would be going over to finish something, and Scott would say, "How about the cruiserweight bully?" And Eric would be like, "Oh, this cruiserweight bully thing." So it was Madden's idea originally, and I think it would have worked if I'm just so beat up.
Right.
It's funny, in my mind I can still go, but I can't.
Body-wise,
I can't. I could work, like I said, there's certain guys I could work with.
Right.
There's certain guys I could work with. But those guys, those young, quick, athletic guys.
Is that part of the reason why you never had your match, I guess the blow-off match with Saban? Because of that?
I had my shoulder operated on.
Yeah, that's right.
But I didn't want to do a job. So I finally said, you know what, I can do a job, or I can go under the knife and not wake up and maybe never see my wife and son again. I'm just not going to do the job.
Exactly.
So,
I guess, how do you answer critics who say that you've done nothing but hurt the credibility, again, of the X Division guys?
I don't see how I did it. I'd never beat anybody straight up. I cheated. I came in and beat them up after they lost matches.
Right.
It's the perception is this.
People don't understand the business, number one.
Yeah, but it's just like, okay, Why does it work? It works because you actually fucking kind of hate me. I'm a big bully.
Right.
You know, I come across like that. So guess what? Then it's time for me to give it back. You know, and I could have worked. I could have worked super strong with those guys and not given them anything.
Right.
You know, I mean, I tried to give them something to show that they were more athletic than I was, but I just couldn't give them the match that I could have 5 years ago. So that was where, you know, I should have just grounded them. I should have pounded them and grounded them. I should have just beat the fuck out of all of them. You know, I should have just done that. Went through them. Because honestly, this is what I tell people. Okay, it's a shoot. Which one of those guys kicks my ass? None.
Right.
None. I hit one of those guys with one shot. What are they going to do?
It's true.
So what are we talking about? I kill the credibility? How do I kill the credibility of it?
I see.
There's a reason why nobody knows who the fuck Ring of Honor is.
You can go into that.
You know, there's a reason nobody knows who it is. Who are they? I don't know who they are. I know there's half of our guys, but I only know our guys because our guys are on TV. I don't know who those guys are. But you know what? When I watch Alex Shelley and like Sanjay do that cool chain wrestling shit that they do,
Right.
I think that's amazing.
I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on some of the guys? You know,
I think those guys are amazing. I'm such a fan of those guys, of Alex and of Saban and Sanjay and Jay, but I think that what you have to do is, you know, there's a reason why people don't go to Iowa State and watch. They'll watch it there in Iowa, but you put that on national TV, ain't nobody gonna watch it. You can't even get people to watch fucking hockey on TV.
Going back to the X Division guys, like you just mentioned all those guys' names, do you feel that they need to learn more psychology and
I think
less spot, and tell a story more in the ring?
But I think they're learning.
Right. I was going to ask you, are you helping these guys?
I point out little tiny things like, you know, somewhere in that match, you've got to do a double down.
Right.
You know, just a double down, crawl over, 1-2, kick out. Just occasionally, but if nothing, you can't get kicked in the. I mean, but at the same time, they're not given enough time to do it. When Saban worked with Sensei in Detroit for that with the Cruiser, they had a great match. You know, they had a really good match because they had 22 minutes to tell a story where they could sell. We got an hour TV and 900 guys on it. It looks like a fucking swarm of bees half the time.
What do you think is going to happen when you guys get the second hour?
I think it's going to vastly improve our show.
Good.
I think that our talent is really, really good. Our young talent's incredibly. I mean, there's some really and the guys. Some of the guys. I mean, I think Shelley's a breakthrough guy. You know, he gets it. He gets the shtick. He can work 3 or 4 different styles.
What are your thoughts on Joe? Small Joe.
He's like, I like Joe because he's like so uniquely different. You know, he's not the big. You know, for a while, every guy, I call it the Ohio Valley Express.
Cookie cutter look.
Yeah, the bodybuilding, just big gassed up guy with he's tatted from head to toe.
Right.
I mean, that's every guy that was in that whatever that was. OVW, right? Yeah, everybody was just this big tatted up bodybuilder. And it was just like every guy that came in, you know, had these horrible prison tattoos all over. And I was just like, God, you know, uncle. And then I saw Joe, and I was just like, okay, now there's a completely, and his work's believable.
Definitely.
You know? And he's a sweetheart. He's a great guy.
What are your thoughts on Kurt Angle?
I mean, he's one of the few guys when I left that I would still watch on WWE programming.
Believable.
He's believable, but he's funny.
Exactly.
I mean, he's a good character. He's very entertaining, and he's got great credibility.
Do you feel that TNA can compete with WWE one day, or do you think they're just two different animals? And
no, I think that they can. I think that it's a slow process. I think the Cars are doing a good job. I mean, they're not just spending money, and you know they're keeping within a budget. They're keeping. I think that they've actually turned a profit the last couple of months, from what I've heard. You know, so I mean, I think that they've got a business plan. I think that they're that the progression and growth is slow but steady. No, I like being part of TNA. I mean, I'm really excited for them.
What were your thoughts on Dusty's booking run in TNA?
I thought it was horrible.
Why is that?
It just was. It was so dated. It's number one. Your demographic it's Fox Sports Network, so it's only in like the 27 largest metropolitan areas is who's actually getting the programming. So in other words, you're in urban. You're doing an urban show. That's where it's being shown, and your commissioner's on a hay bale on the back of a pickup truck with Daisy Duke girls. I mean, number one, if you don't even know what your demographic is that you're selling to, I mean, that alone would have just told me, okay, this guy is completely clueless. But he beat every babyface except his son.
Yeah. How do you like working with Jay Lethal?
I like Jay. He's a sweetheart of a kid. Good
Super.
attitude. He's a good athlete. And people say, well, how does he? You guys have pigeonholed him now. He's in this. No, man. It's just like when Glenn did the Diesel character.
Isaac, yeah.
But he did the Diesel
Oh, yeah,
character afterward.
Yes.
And he learned to work like I did. Then he did like did the Taker brother thing and learned. So he learned like two different styles of two different guys that have both been successful. Then from that got his own. Sometimes you got to put somebody else. Jay's 19, 20 years old.
Young. Yeah.
It's just like, dude, it's not like he's 42 years old. We made it. We made him the black machismo. He's young. Sometimes you got to teach a guy to be a character in order to find somewhere out of there. He'll find his own character.
Whose idea was all that?
I watched him do it. I watched him do the character one day. He was doing. They all the young guys do these incredible phone pranks.
Right.
They call people and they'll call 900 numbers and Sanjay will be the Indian guy and they're really funny. I mean, they just amuse themselves. So they were doing the Macho. Macho was calling different guys. And I said, guy, but when he does it, he does all the mannerisms.
Yeah, Jay's created
that. So just like, so I said to him, I said, can you I said, how much? He said, so next time I saw him, he went out in the ring and did the punches and threw somebody off and did the elbow.
Right.
And I said, fuck. I said, this is perfect. We can, we'll run with this.
Randy actually called him up too.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So, and I heard that Randy said it was, was cool. Whatever. I'd love it if somebody could emulate me that well and do me that well and be athletic. And
Looking back on your career, not saying that it's over, but I guess who are your favorite and least favorite opponents?
Favorites were Scott, Bret, Shawn. I liked working against Goldberg because it had that kind of shoot feel to it.
Did he understand the business, do you think?
Enough.
Right.
Enough. I think he's another guy. I mean, Godfrey, he was in the business 3 years. I mean,
right.
He had a pretty good damn run,
I'd say. Best ribs you've ever seen?
Best ribs?
We didn't really talk about any ribs, really.
It's always shit. I think the shit ribs are always the best ones.
Tammy and all.
What's that?
Tammy sandwich.
Oh, that was me and Kid. I just produced the feces. Kid actually put the shit in their food.
Nice.
That was a rough one. I mean, I remember one time the guys put a pie tin in the shower, and each guy took a dump in it. It was like 8 or 9 guys took a dump in it. I did not participate in this, and they put it in Medusa's bag and then did the shake and bake. And Medusa never sold it.
Wow.
And that was after that, nobody bothered.
Right.
It's like she didn't sell it, so it was like.
What's your standout road story from all areas?
Standout roads. Okay, this is one of my favorite stories of all time. We leave Indianapolis, I think it was, and we used to call them hose vans, a 15-passenger van we used to rent. It's Waltman. I'll go from the back of the van forward. It's Waltman, then Scott and Shawn Michaels, and then Hunter and I in front. And I'm co-pilot and Hunter's driving. We've had probably a case of beer. Paul's completely sober.
Right.
we had a case of beer. I think there was some Jack Daniels in there, and we've all taken some gimmicks. We've all taken some somas, and everybody's ever seen somebody that the somas. When you take too many somas, you go into the soma shakes.
Right.
So we pull in. It used to be an Old Days Inn, but it's something else. And they used to have those things called Tasty Worlds, or whatever. It was like a restaurant connected to the front of the hotel. So we pull in. And as we pull in, we pull to the back side of it off a side road. So we pull we're almost like back towards the kitchen when we park. So we get out and we all finish our beers, and we put the beers on the curbs and wherever. We're all laughing. Walk around the corner, which is a blind corner of wood. Walk down the other side, which is blind, and there's the glass opening of the door that sticks out. It's like a little atrium before you go in. We pile in, and when we do, there's probably 20, 25 cops having some kind of a meet and greet in this restaurant. And we all come in like the Bob Seger story with the hair, just, and we do our best.
All right.
But we're in now. So it's like we walk out, I mean, we're not going to make it 50 feet. So we get in there, and I tell Hunter, I said, Paul, go out, police the beer, and get the beers up.
Right.
Get the beer that's open, put it in the back of the van, covered up with bags. So he goes back out. And this is like Paul would always wear slacks and a sport coat. Like he always dressed nice on the road. The rest of us, look like, Somalians. So he goes out and comes back, and he said, God, he said there was 15 beers laying. The kid had one on the car next to us. I mean, it was just So we're in there and we order our food, and the cops are just, you can just, they're just glaring at us.
Do you think they knew who you guys were, pretty much?
Well, one of them said something, and Scott said, "Hey, Russell," or something like that to the guy. And I'm thinking, oh, God, this is it. But slowly, his pills start to kick in. He's closest to the door, so Scott gets him out.
Right.
So he comes back. Kid's in the van. Kid's asleep.
Right.
He's passed out. Scott comes back. So I'm sitting like this, and then Shawn's here. The glass window's here, and then Hunter's here, and Scott's here. And we eat our food, and I look over at Shawn, and Shawn's going into the shakes.
Right.
So he says, "Big man, you're going to have to help me out of here." I'm thinking, oh, man. So about this time, Scott gets up. Scott bumblefucks through and bumps into some stuff. He's pretty bad. And I'm not feeling any pain, but I've got the advantage of being the heaviest. So I look at Hunter, and I look at Shawn, and Shawn's just, it's going to be a rough one. I get him up. I get him about halfway to the door, and I hear one of the cops say, "Fuck that, that's it." And they all get up, and they're going to arrest us all right in this place. They're putting the cuffs on Shawn, and I just said, "No, he's epileptic." And they're like, "What?" They said, "He's got two options. Either he goes to the hospital or he goes to jail." I said, "Hospital."
Right.
So,
cool.
Ambulance comes. They put Shawn on the gurney, and Shawn,
just tell him to sell it.
He was out of it. I mean, he was gone. Because we drank that Jack, man. And by the 30 minutes we were in that thing, that Jack hit everybody's system, man. It was just like, oh. And Hunter's stone sober because he was the wheelman. So they come and they slam the back of the van open, but they're looking with flashlights. There's nothing in there. Kid's passed out. They're like, "What's wrong with him? He's just tired." So I said, "I'll travel. I'll go to the hospital with Shawn." They took us to, I think we're going to Louisville or someplace that night. We left Indianapolis. Must have been Louisville. It took us, I think, University of Louisville Hospital. So we get there, and Shawn's kicking out of it, but he's still pretty whacked.
Right.
So the doctor's asking him questions, like, "What days?" And he sounded like a billy goat. And I'm laughing. I'm standing there and I'm laughing. The doctor, what's so funny? I'm thinking, nothing, dude. He just took some pills. It's going to kick out in about 35 minutes. Just don't sweat it. And but this is what's funny is like Hunter just like started traveling with us, and this has like happened like 5 times in 8 nights. That something's happened, and it's like somebody else, like one of us almost OD'd one night, and it's just like he came and picked us up at the hospital, and he's just looking at me like, you gotta be kidding me that you guys, this is how you guys live night in, night out. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I can't travel with you guys. I'm like, I know, we'll calm it down. Because we couldn't lose our wheel man. I was like, oh, please don't leave us. I need you. But God, that was a story, man, that just, when you think about it, just like I've thought so many times that recreating that, like in just a movie, would be hilarious. It would really be hilarious. I probably didn't do it justice in telling it, but.
Did you ever feel pressured to do steroids at all, or is it no pressure?
To do what?
Steroids?
No, I never felt. I mean,
just part of the business.
Yeah, I mean, I did them on and off. I didn't do them. I think the last time I did them was Oz.
Right.
And then when I came back, when I tore my bicep, I did them because they told me it would, at my age, I'd come back faster, which I think because I did them, I tore my quad. But
what was, I guess, your favorite time in your career?
I mean, there's so many different. I mean, it's.
Do you have a favorite moment?
It'd be hard to beat the Backlund in Madison Square Garden, just from a mark standpoint alone. Just to be, and it was different then. To be the WWF champion, the belt didn't switch hands very often. That was pretty big. I mean, I would have never have thought that was going to happen to me. So I would say that was about. If I had to pick one moment.
Honky Tonk Man has called you out a lot online. Have you ever heard any of his promos about you?
Who's he?
Okay. The greatest IC champion of all time.
Oh.
Any thoughts on that, or?
I don't know what he said. What did he say?
He just buries you and stuff like that.
Who doesn't?
Mm.
Get in the line, Honky Tonk. Who'd you ever beat? Not me.
Do you think the business could ever boom again, like it has in the 80s and 90s?
Oh yeah, yeah, I think so.
Just goes in cycles.
Yeah.
Are you surprised that Hogan and Flair still wrestle today?
Amazing. I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, do you remember in 1990 when we were sitting in the locker room going, one of these days those 2 fucking pricks will be gone and this will be ours? I said, here it is. We're both out of the business, basically. We're not wrestling anymore. These 2 guys are still wrestling.
What are your thoughts on newsletters and the internet?
I don't know. My only problem with newsletters and the internet is it's the same as food critics or movie critics. It amazes me that a guy can say this guy's a good worker or not a good worker when he doesn't.
He's never been in the ring.
Yeah, this guy's a good surgeon. He's not a good surgeon. As compared to what? How many surgeries have you done? Well, I've done none.
All right.
It's just like best worker in the world's Hogan. He made the most money. It's fake. It's fake. The only thing that are real is the miles and the money.
It's a good quote for a book. Would you ever consider writing a book?
Never.
No. Okay. I guess
maybe a fiction.
Is there anyone you never had a chance to work with that you wanted to work with, or you wanted to work?
Let me think. God, no, right? Who was in my era that I didn't get to work with?
Worked with pretty much everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked. Let me think. Let me think for a few seconds. Would have loved to work against the Iron Sheik. I'd work the Iron Sheik tomorrow. I would love to work.
We just did an interview with him about 3 weeks ago, and it was insane. It was awesome.
I'll get you a copy of it.
I made my first road trip into business with Sheik.
What do you remember of that?
I'm 8 minutes in. We land. I'm 8 minutes into the trip and I smell weed. I'm driving. Sid's sitting next to me. Dutch Mantel's sitting behind Sid. I smell weed. I turn around and Kyle says, "Oh, fuck, Sid. Who's the big giant jabroni?" I said, "I'm not a jabroni, Sheik." "Of course not, baby." I said, "Sheik," I said, "how about keeping that down, man?" He goes, "Oh, don't worry. I got cologne." He smokes. We stop. We're going to go. Now we're going to go work out. He stops and gets a 6-pack of Heineken. And then splashes some Brut on and goes to the gym and does like 135 for 2 reps. That was his workout. Fucking classic.
Amazing. What are your thoughts on the lack of kayfabe today in wrestling? You think it hurt the business?
Fuck. No, I don't think so.
You think the business was pretty much already exposed?
Yeah. I mean, but I don't know. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said that when Vince blew that car up the other day or whatever, that like the phone boards went off like all over the place in the town, hospital,
right.
FBI. You think, fuck, there's still dumb marks out there.
Do you think the nWo could still work today?
Nah. It's been bad. I don't know. It would have to be later. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
it's too soon.
It's almost like the Horsemen. How many times can you do the Horsemen?
Right.
But if you put together like with production qualities you have today, like especially with Vince's library of the guys, like he could put together some incredible package and then make it almost like the Fantastic Four, and take like 4 guys that were his up and coming guys, like almost like the new generation. Like
right.
These don't take guys that are established. Get 4 guys that that really you think can do it, and let those guys grow together as a faction, and and do that. I think that's the way you do it. This is the new. But then and I would have Rick as their mouthpiece.
How JJ was.
Yeah,
right.
Take and make Rick be the mouthpiece, and I think that would work.
That would work. That's a good idea, actually. What are your thoughts on John Cena and Batista, who are pretty much the flagship wrestlers today?
I've really grown to appreciate and respect Cena. I think that he's a pretty damn good hand. I mean, I like him. He's a good guy. I've never heard anybody say anything negative about him. Hunter said he's just a sweetheart. Do whatever. I mean, just he's a 100% company guy, which you have to be to be that the bear up there. Batista, I guess he's had. I mean, I really don't watch the program. I'll watch Shawn wrestle.
Right.
So I got a chance to watch Cena wrestle against Shawn, but I don't ever watch SmackDown, or I just
He's got a lot of heat on him, I guess, for different reasons. But
Batista does. Yeah. Yeah, he's on top.
Right.
Name a guy on top. Cena's like I'm sure the guys in the locker room hate Cena. I'm sure of it. That's just that goes with the territory.
Would you ever like to be entered into the WWF Hall of Fame?
Doesn't matter.
What do you think is wrong?
Does it pay anything?
Yeah, exactly. What do you think is wrong with the business today?
UFC.
Do you watch it?
UCF, UFC.
Yeah, UFC.
UFC. Yeah, I watch it. Yeah, fuck, I don't even watch boxing anymore.
Do you think that one day their ratings for pay-per-view is already better than wrestling? Do you feel like people are going to watch that and then go watch wrestling and say this shit's, horrible compared to, what we go watch UFC? And
well, I said my whole thing is this, that a lot of people think, a lot of smarts think the closer that pro wrestling emulates mixed martial arts, then that'll be the key to pro wrestling. The closer it becomes, there's no comparison, so because that's fake.
right.
You know what I mean?
Look, Inoki's done it in New Japan, and that company went to hell.
And you know that it's pro wrestling, it's fake.
Right.
It's not real. That's real. So you can't ever compare the two, because this one's always going to fail in comparison, because you can make it as simulated as you can. Like, unless you're going to take pro wrestling and give it the exact same technical advantages that you use in major motion pictures. Shoot it like that. Shoot it with, all those different angles. If you're going to shoot it like that, then fine. production quality can make it better than a fight, because mixed martial arts 9 times out of 10, guys sitting in the rest position or in half guard or whatever, it's boring as shit.
Right.
You know. So if you can do that, that's fine. But you've got to separate the two. You know.
How'd you land yourself in movies, The Punisher and stuff? How'd that all come about?
You know, it's just every couple of years, like, you know, it's every couple of years. Like when I was early in my career, I did Turtles, Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, because I needed somebody to carry that. They'd built this giant costume for the Super Shredder character, and the guy they had there couldn't carry it. He wasn't big enough to carry it. It wasn't strong enough to move. The actual cape of it like weighed 90 pounds. So they just were looking for a guy that could basically carry the costume. So I got in that, and then from that I got a little part in a couple other small things. I got a couple of television shows, and then I got into wrestling, and you know, other things came along, but I was making so much wrestling that, you know, somebody offers you in the movie business, you know, to get $100,000 for a month's work's great. I've been losing money,
right,
in the heyday, to give up, you know, to give up a month of my salary. So then, like Sabretooth, I was offered that, and I had to turn that down because I was in the middle of a run with WCW. Then when the Punisher came along, they weren't doing anything with me in New York, and they said, you know, would you cut your hair? And I said, what's it matter? Yeah.
Right. Did you have to ask Vince?
No.
No.
I just told him I was going to cut my hair. I actually, you know, I offered it to do it on a pay-per-view with Chris, but they just, you know, at that point I was, you know, I was so unliked, I guess, that they just, I will do it on TV. I said, you know what, fine, do whatever you want.
Right.
My neck was bad on top of that. So I said, you know what, I said, I'm going to go ahead and do this movie, and then when the movie's over, see what they got for me. And they hemmed and hawed, and I said, all right, well, while you're waiting, I'm going to get my neck fixed.
All right.
So I got my neck fixed, and time ran out, and they, you know, Jim Ross said, man, he said, I said, what would you do? He said, man, Kevin, he said, just get out of here.
Cash out.
Yeah, he said, don't stay here. He said, they don't know what to do with you. I said, good enough for me. So I went home.
What is in the future for Kevin Nash?
I don't know. I hope I get some movies. You know, I'll stay up part of TNA. Hopefully we'll get 2 hours. I'd love to commentate. I think
That would be good.
I think that's the natural progression that I would do to commentate. I'd have to change my style because I understand it's completely different when you actually commentate besides guest commentate. But no, I'd like to stay a part of the business as long as it doesn't. It'll never consume me again.
What do you do today as far as like what's a typical day for Kevin Nash?
Typical day for me is if it's school, if it's like during school. Okay, today I got up this morning and took my son to basketball camp. Normally I would go to the gym from there. I'd come home or have lunch. Probably my wife would probably meet me out because I'd be out. We'd have lunch someplace. Then come back to the house. We usually go through the mail, like do whatever we had to business-wise.
Right.
Then pick up my son, mess around with him till dinner, have dinner as a family, watch some TV, have a glass of wine with my wife, go to bed, do it all over. Just
good
normal.
Times.
Yeah, just normal, just fast, be a family.
Is there anything that you want to say to your fans out there that you never had a chance to say before?
I killed Lee Harvey Oswald.
Not Vince? You didn't blow up his limo?
No. No, I mean, you know, there's I have a fan base out there, and I think that when you're in your prime your run, you take them for granted. And now that it's, you know, my run's basically over, and you go someplace and your fans show up and they've like got something from like '91 that they've kept and they want it signed. Like, I don't think they realize how much that means to you, you know. Especially now, it's just like, wow. Like there's so many times I go to a signing and people will bring stuff And like the person that's in charge of signing is like trying to rush the people through. I'm like, fuck, wait a minute. I want to look at that. I haven't seen, I want to look at this. This is bringing back memories. Like somebody had a European program with Scott and I on the cover. We were fighting each other for the, and it was like in 1993 or 4 or something like that. And, Scott was young and so handsome, and we looked like 2 little babies on the cover of this thing, And I just looked at that, man, and it was just like, it was such a deja vu. I was just like, I just went right back to the bus, like, drinking the Coronas, and I just thought, man, I said, you know what? I said, because people want to say, if you had to do it over, would you do it? It's just like, how can you change anything? Because, you change, it's almost like that, those movies where you change with a butterfly effect.
Right.
You change one thing and, change one thing and maybe I don't have a son, maybe that changes. So, I mean, to where I am right now, I'm pretty happy the way things turned out. My health's not great. I'm beat up. It's hard for me to get around. Like, the idea of going to an amusement park or a theme park and walking around all day on these knees is, it's a Vicodin calling.
People still recognize you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'd have it a lot easier if I wasn't damn tall. But I've lost a lot of weight, and I let my hair go gray. And I just, because for a long time it was just like, if I dye my hair and I look in the mirror, man, my face really hasn't aged. So I think I'm 35 and I think I can do a lot of things I can't do.
Right.
I let my hair go gray. I get up in the morning, I'm just like, hey, 2 more years, dude, you're 50. It's just like,
Right.
So I'm happy to where I am. I have regrets of things I've done and mistakes I've made, but all those mistakes have brought me to here. All the lessons. I haven't made a major mistake, in a lot of years. So I think I've finally, in my late 40s, grown, matured.
What was the last major mistake?
Rushing to a massage therapy thing and rear-ended somebody because I was so impatient about 2 years ago in a big-ass truck of mine, scaring the shit out of the lady I hit. But, just that still sometimes, you're just not taking a breath and saying, I drove, we did the family vacation a couple weeks ago. I rented a van and we drove up to Michigan to see my family and stuff. And it's like, these guys would drive by you at 90 miles an hour. And I've had my cruise set on 75. And lo and behold, an hour and 20 minutes later, I'd pass
Still
them.
there.
I'd pass them and here this idiot is weaving in and out of traffic in Cincinnati. I'm like, dude. So, I mean, I have learned to be more patient, I watched the thing one time. I was on one of those inspirational or Christian shows I was watching. And the guy said to always remember to halt, which means never be too hungry, never let yourself get too angry, never let yourself get too lonely, or never let yourself get too tired. If you do those 4 things, you'll make a lot less mistakes in your life. So, I mean, I think that's hungry for anything, too hungry for money, sex, whatever, But I think if you just take life for what it is, it just, you live a lot longer. What the fuck do I know, though? I'm just a wrestler.
Well, thanks.
TitleMatchNetwork.com